Chapter 1340. Heresy. No matter what my identity is, I am now a disciple of the inner court of the divine nether realm. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, you are helping an outsider of the Blue Dragon Hall to force an inner court disciple. Don't you feel ashamed? As for your rumor that I will cause a war between the divine nether realm and the dragon nether realm, isn't that too much nonsense? I'm just a small disciple. If I can cause a war between two great nether realms, why would I join the inner court? If Martial Uncle wants to help two outsiders capture me, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. Zhuan raised his head and looked at Xianzhong, who had an ugly expression on his face, as he mocked. Xianzhong narrowed his eyes and coldly stared at Chun. He grinned and said, "You're the one who's twisting the truth. Who in the Nine Nether Realm doesn't know about the grudge between the Ryuka descendants and the Blue Dragon Hall? You joining my divine academy is probably to seek our protection. Hey, what a good idea." After saying this, Xianzhong's attention fell onto Mu Chenxue. He said earnestly, "Martial niece Chenxue, this child's identity is already clear, so there's no need for me to say anything more, right? Even if the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries don't come today, I will still expel this kid from the inner court of the divine nether realm." Martial Uncle Xianzhong, could it be that you alone can represent the entire inner court? Or is it that your profound underworld peak has the final say in the entire inner court? You don't have the right to expel Zhuan at all. At the very least, the 9 peak masters have to gather and make a joint decision. Suddenly, a sharp voice sounded out. Following that, a giant sword of light flew over from the horizon. Intense sword into the sky and stabbed between Mu Chenxue and Xianzhong. The sword of light gradually disappeared and a young man with a long sword on his back stood in front of Mu Chenxue. His eyes were cold as he stared at Xianzhong in front of him. "Jian Mu, do you also want to meddle in other people's business?" Xianzhong frowned slightly and said in a displeased tone. Jian Mu shook his head and said, "I am just doing my job." Regardless of Zhuowen's past identity, he is now a disciple of the Inner Academy. As a member of the Inner Academy, I will naturally not allow the people of the Dragon Wasteland to openly take someone from the Inner Academy away from our own territory. As for how to deal with Yun, it's not up to you, Martial Uncle Xianzhong, to decide. At the very least, you have to consult the other 8 peak masters. Xianzhong's face gradually darkened. He grinned and said, "Jian Mu, it seems that you also want to protect this Ryuka descendant. In that case, don't blame Martial Uncle for being merciless. Leave this fellow to me. He's also an 8th level Martial Emperor. I wonder how strong the geniuses of your inner courtyard are?" The 7th Azure Dragon envoy took a step forward and chuckled. He brought along a howling hurricane and instantly swept in front of Jian Mu with a waist blade in his hand. The waist blade was curved like a crescent moon and the surface of the blade emitted a blazing white light. A strong and heavy emperor's aura surged from the surface of the waist blade. It was obvious that the waist blade of the 7th Azure Dragon envoy was a high-grade emperor weapon. Jian Mu snorted coldly and formed a sword seal with his right hand. Then, the long sword on his back was unsheathed and held in his hand. He flicked the long sword upwards and a crescent moon-like sword chi soared into the sky. Clang! The sword chi blasted on the waist blade. The 7th Azure Dragon envoy's face changed slightly when he discovered that the sword chi was extremely powerful. He couldn't help but retreat continuously. So strong. Zhuan narrowed his eyes as he stared at Jian Mu, who had repelled the 7th Azure Dragon envoy with a single sword strike. He was amazed. Back in the desolate ancient city, he already felt that Jian Mu was extraordinary. At that time, Jian Mu was only a 7th level Martial Emperor. Now that a year had passed, Jian Mu had also successfully advanced to the 8th level Martial Emperor realm. The battle strength that he displayed was so terrifying that the 7th Azure Dragon envoy, who was also an 8th level Martial Emperor, could only retreat continuously under his sword strike. "Let me deal with this guy. Old 7, you go and capture Zhuan. As for brother Xianzhong, I'll leave the little girl to you," the 6th Azure Dragon envoy faintly said as he leaped into the air. A terrifying force erupted as a series of explosive sounds rang out in the air. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's aura was much stronger than the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's because the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy was a genuine 9th-level martial emperor. Although he hadn't comprehended the power of law and become an invincible martial emperor, he was very close to becoming a half-saint. As the peak master of the profound underworld peak, Xianzhong naturally had the cultivation of a half-saint. When he was young, the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was older than him and his cultivation was also higher. By chance, he was saved by the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy. Later, as time passed, Xianzhong's talent was also revealed. His cultivation slowly caught up and eventually surpassed the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy to become a half-saint. He also became the peak master of the profound underworld peak. If it wasn't for the kindness in the past, Xianzhong wouldn't have helped the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy. However, he had no choice but to do so now. After all, the path of martial Dao was about the Dao heart. If one's Dao heart wasn't stable, it would be a great hindrance to the next realm. This was Xianzhong's mentality. If he didn't repay the kindness of the 6th Azure Dragon emissary for saving his life, his Dao heart would definitely be flawed, which would be harmful to his future path of martial arts. This was also the reason why he wholeheartedly helped the 6th Azure Dragon emissary. Boom! Boom! The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy took a step forward and pressed down with his right hand. His palm began to be covered by azure scales and his body was filled with endless dragon roars. At this moment, it was as if he had turned into a huge azure dragon. Jian Mu frowned slightly and a cautious look appeared in his eyes. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was much stronger than the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. However, Jian Mu still only had one sword. It soared into the sky and turned into a huge sword of light that stretched across the horizon. Bang! The light sword and the dragon claw of the 6th Azure Dragon emissary clashed together, creating a terrifying energy ripple. Explosions that sounded like fireworks exploded in the air, continuously and majestically. Slash! Jian Mu leaped up and countless sword shadows surged out from under his feet. These sword shadows swept out from under his feet as if they were carrying Jian Mu towards the sky. In the sky, Jian Mu gently inhaled a breath of air. His right hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. Immediately he slashed out horizontally. An arc-shaped sword glow spread out, sweeping through the surrounding space and instantly arriving in front of the 6th Green Dragon Envoy. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy snorted coldly and stretched out his empty left hand. The surface of his left hand was covered with azure scales and looked as tough as azure stones. Boom! 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 The two instantly collided and immediately engaged in a great battle. The terrifying shockwaves spread out and many disciples in the square were shocked. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Jian Mu was indeed powerful. He was only at the 8th level of the Great Emperor realm, but he was able to fight evenly with the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy who was at the 9th level of the Great Emperor realm. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy couldn't even do anything to Jian Mu. After all, in the Emperor realm, once one reached the Advanced Emperor realm, the difference in strength between each level was huge. It was normally very difficult for an 8th level of the Emperor realm to fight against a 9th level of the Emperor realm, but Jian Mu did it easily. Moreover, Nguyen sharply noticed that Jian Mu probably hadn't used his full strength. This was his intuition. Senior Xianzhong, I think we should do what we need to do? The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy glanced at Jian Mu with fear and then said to Xianzhong who was beside him. Now, the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy had a belly full of anger. He was defeated by Jian Mu who was at the same level as him in one move. This was a great humiliation to him, but he didn't dare to provoke Jian Mu again. He knew very well that he was inferior. Now, he only wanted to experience the thrill of oppressing others. Unfortunately, the person he chose to oppress was Zhuowen. Xianzhong nodded and glanced at Mu Chenxue. He said, Martial niece Mu Chenxue, this isn't a real saint weapon. It will be very difficult for you to stop me. As he spoke, Xianzhong took a step forward and stretched out his right hand. A strange ink-black energy swept out from his palm. This energy contained an extremely terrifying power of law. Boom! The moment this black energy slammed into the golden barrier that Mu Chenxue had created with the golden feather, it produced an extremely strange corrosive power. There was a hissing sound of corrosion at the place where the two collided, and wisps of white smoke rose. I have grasped the law of mysterious underworld. This is mysterious underworld chi from the 9 underworlds. It is extremely corrosive. If it isn't a saint weapon, it won't be able to stop it at all. Xianzhong's eyes were indifferent. He clenched his right hand and the black energy turned into a giant hand that was several feet long. It slammed heavily onto the golden barrier. The corrosive and offensive powers collided, and the golden barrier collapsed. Dang dang dang. Mu Qinshue's face was pale as she took a few steps back. However, Yun beside her took a step forward and placed his right hand on her back, stopping her from retreating. Qinshue, are you all right? Yun asked in a worried voice. Mu Qinshu gently shook her head and said, Yun, quickly go to the star-picking pavilion where my master is. This Xianzhong has already gone crazy. He actually brought the Blue Dragon Hall to my Sky Capital Peak to capture you. He really doesn't put the Sky Capital Peak in his eyes. Yun nodded and hugged her. Purple lightning wings that were 10 feet long appeared on his back. With a rumbling sound, he turned into a purple bolt of lightning and disappeared on the spot. Want to leave? Xianzhong had his hands behind his back as he took a step forward. He instantly blocked in front of Zhuan. Waves of mysterious underworld energy surged out and turned into countless black tentacles. They swept toward Zhuan and sealed off all directions. This black energy contains the law of mysterious underworld with strong corrosive power. I can't let Qinshui come into contact with it. Zhuan narrowed his eyes. He clapped his right hand and a force pushed Mu Qinshui to the ground behind him. Zhuan's eyes were blurred. He waved his right hand and celestial power surged out from his body. He waved his hand in the air and instantly, Zhuan disappeared from the void. Boom boom boom. Countless waves of mysterious underworld energy swept over, but they all missed because Zhuan, who was originally standing on the spot, had disappeared without a trace. Where is he? Xianzhong was stunned. He turned his head and instantly saw a figure walking out of the void tens of meters away. It was Zhuan. Chapter 1341. Killing Intent, Immortal Dao Technique? How do you know Ao Yuan Peak's technique? Looking at Zhuan who appeared a few dozen meters away, Xianzhong's eyes flashed as he asked in surprise. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, I advise you not to act recklessly. Zhuan is not just an official disciple of the Inner Yard. He has been accepted as a lineal disciple by Martial Uncle Xiaoyu. Are you still going to help the 2 Blue Dragon ambassadors capture Zhuan? Mu Qinshu said angrily. As a senior expert of the Inner Yard, not only did Xianzhong not protect the interests of the Inner Yard disciples, but he also helped the people of the Blue Dragon Hall to capture Zhuan. This action was too much. He has been accepted as a lineal disciple by Xiaoyu? Xianzhong whispered in surprise. Zhuan slowly turned around and stared indifferently at the alarmed Xianzhong in front of him. This Xianzhong was taking advantage of his seniority and actually dared to openly capture him in the Inner Academy. He was simply overbearing and rampant. So what if he is Xiaoyu? He is a Ryuka spy. If he is allowed to stay in the Inner Yard, he will become a big threat. It is better to hand him over to the Blue Dragon Hall as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. Xianzhong's eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. He had already taken action. If he stopped now, he would undoubtedly become a laughing stock. Hence, Xianzhong had to capture Zhuan this time. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. With that, Xianzhong stretched out his right hand again. Thousands of black tentacles swept out from the surrounding space. The corrosive power seemed to be omnipresent and sealed the space around Zhuan. Zhuowen's expression changed drastically as void energy burst out from his surroundings, forming a circular protective layer around him. The black tentacles that were rushing towards him slammed into the protective layer formed by the void energy and seemed to enter a bottomless pit, unable to touch Zhuowen's body at all. The Immortal Dao technique can form a defense? Xianzhong frowned slightly. In his impression, the Immortal Dao technique of Ao Yuan Peak should only be able to use the void power to escape. Since when did it use the void power to form a defense like Zhuan? Annihilation. Zhuowen softly exhaled. The space dozens of feet around him immediately collapsed and shattered. The black tentacles that were about to make contact with Zhuowen actually came to a complete stop within the shattered space. They did not move at all. What? He can even use the power of the void to attack. How did he do it? Xianzhong was truly shocked. Whether it was attacking or defending, Yuan had comprehended them last night. However, he was not very proficient in using them. His technique was rather rusty, and it was very difficult for him to block Xianzhong's attack. Moreover, Yuan knew that Xianzhong hadn't used his full strength. Xianzhong was a semi-sage expert. So, Xianzhong would have been crushed to death even if he had used his full strength. Xianzhong wouldn't have been lucky if he had used his full strength. It seems you are not simple. However, the gap between you and me is too big. I will let you know how strong a half-step sage is. Xianzhong's gaze became serious. He immediately clenched his right hand, and the surrounding black tentacles unexpectedly exploded continuously with a rumbling sound. The defense formed by the shattered space around Zhuan couldn't withstand a single blow, and was directly shattered. Zhuan groaned and retreated continuously. A trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. A half-step sage was too terrifying. It was difficult for Zhuan to resist such a simple attack. He knew that even if he used all his trump cards, he wouldn't be a match for Xianzhong. Of course, if he still had Emperor Wu Tian's sword, he might be able to resist Xianzhong. Unfortunately, Emperor Wu Tian's sword's 2 chances had been used up, and now it was completely scrapped. Xianzhong, you bastard, stop it. A shocking shout came from afar. Immediately, a middle-aged man with disheveled hair in a loose robe rushed over. His gaze fell on Xianzhong, and he quickly shouted, "Xiao Yu and Martial Uncle Wenbai?" Xianzhong turned his head and immediately recognized the man with disheveled hair. Wasn't he the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, Xiao Yu? However, Xianzhong was most concerned about the black-robed elder behind Xiao Yu. The elder was a highly respected and powerful senior in the entire inner yard. His cultivation was in the Saint Realm, and he was one of the pillars of the inner yard. Xianzhong was puzzled that someone like Wenbai actually came with Xiao Yu. Was it all because of this guy? Thinking of this, Xianzhong's gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was retreating under the attack of the black tentacles. His expression was uncertain. Mu Chenxue also saw Xiao Yu and Wenbai rushing over, and she heaved a sigh of relief. She knew that once Xiao Yu came, Xianzhong wouldn't dare to act rashly. Especially since Xiao Yu was followed by Wenbai, an expert of the older generation, Mu Chenxue was more relieved. Xianzhong, directly kill Zhuowen. After this, my Azure Dragon Hall's palace master will give you a suitable reward. Moreover, you've already made a move against this kid. This kid will definitely harbor a grudge in his heart in the future. If you don't get rid of him by the roots, I'm afraid he'll become quite a threat to you in the future. Just as Xianzhong was hesitating, the voice of the 6th Azure Dragon envoy, who was fighting fiercely with Jian Mu, suddenly rang out in Xianzhong's mind. Xianzhong slowly narrowed his eyes. Kill! Xianzhong bellowed and made a prompt decision. He decided to completely kill Zhuowen. He was one of the 9 peak masters, and his status was much higher than Zhuowen's. He believed that even if he killed Zhuowen now, he would at most be scolded by the 3 martial uncles of the inner yard. They wouldn't really do anything to him. If he didn't kill him, Zhuowen would probably bear a grudge against him, and he would probably bear a grudge in the future. At that time, if he was stabbed in the back, the loss would outweigh the gain. Bastard! Looking at Xianzhong, who was advancing instead of retreating, Yuan cursed in a low voice. He continuously executed the Immortal Path technique and escaped into the void. At the same time, the purple lightning wings on his back flapped continuously, and his speed soared to the extreme. Mu Chenxue's face changed drastically. She wanted to help, but Xianzhong and Zhuowen's speed was too fast. In her current state, it was really difficult for her to catch up with the 2 of them. Mu Chenxue gritted her teeth and waved her jade-like hand. Immediately, the golden feather in her hand flew out, turned into a golden light, and blasted towards Xianzhong's back. The golden light that was like the sun spread out, and the feather began to expand continuously. In the end, it became a few hundred feet long, like a golden mountain. It crushed down from the void, and heavily smashed onto Xian Zhong's head. Xian Zhong frowned slightly. He stomped his foot, and the mysterious underworld energy that contained the law of mysterious underworld turned into a black sharp sword. It soared into the sky and slashed the surface of the golden feather. With a clang, the golden feather was directly cut into two by the sharp sword formed by the law of mysterious underworld. You can't save him. Xian Zhong snorted coldly. Even though Zhuowen relied on the Immortal Path technique's void power and purple lightning wings to increase his speed to the extreme, the difference between their realms was too big. Even though Xian Zhong wasn't good at speed, he still easily caught up with Zhuowen. At this moment, Xian Zhong looked down at Zhuowen, as if he was looking at an insignificant ant. He said flatly, "Tun, you can only blame yourself for not knowing how to appreciate kindness. If you had followed us before, you could still have kept your life. Unfortunately, you rejected us. Now I can only kill you. Don't blame me when you go to hell." After speaking, Xian Zhong raised his right hand and gently placed it on his palm. This palm contained the terrifying law of mysterious underworld. Waves of black cold air, like a storm, enveloped Zhuowen, and the bone-chilling cold almost covered Zhuowen's entire body. Boom! Xian Zhong's palm landed heavily on Zhuowen's chest. Then he realized that there was something hard on Zhuowen's chest that blocked his palm attack. Then, Xian Zhong realized that a purple gas had spread from his palm to his entire right arm. Rip! Under the powerful palm attack, Zhuowen's outer clothes were torn apart, revealing the purple-black inner armor hidden under his clothes. This inner armor was the Divine Thorns armor that Tuan had obtained from the Azure Dragon Palace. The Divine Thorns armor was a high-grade defensive emperor weapon. Its defensive power was extremely strong, and it also contained a powerful poison. This poison was so strong that even a high-level emperor would be in trouble if infected. Puchi! Xian Zhong was too fast. He was so fast that Zhuowen didn't even have time to react. Fortunately, he had the armor of thorns to protect him. Even so, Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow. Even with the protection of the Divine Thorns armor, it was difficult for him to withstand the attack of a half-step saint. Moreover, Yun was shocked to see that cracks began to appear on the surface of the Divine Thorns armor. These cracks began to spread, and finally, the Divine Thorns armor that protected him shattered. Poison? You have a high-grade defensive emperor weapon? Xian Zhong frowned slightly. He looked with slight surprise at the young man who retreated repeatedly and had an extremely weak aura. Especially the poison on the Divine Bramble armor. It was like a maggot that coiled around the young man's palm and intended to enter his body. I didn't expect you to have such a defensive emperor weapon. However, you're still going to die today. Xian Zhong clenched his right fist and the poisonous gas that had lingered in his palm was immediately dispersed. He was a half-sage, so the thorny divine armor's poison didn't have much of an effect on him. At most, it would cause him some trouble. After dealing with the poison in his palm, Xian Zhong snorted coldly. He took a step forward and caught up with Zhuowen again. His right palm struck out again, and the hurricane caused by the law of mysterious underworld swept across the entire space. Xian Zhong, did you take my words for granted? Fuck you. Just as Xian Zhong's palm was about to reach Zhuowen, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Zhuowen and struck out with his palm as well. Powerful flames burst out from the palm, and the flames contained the law of mysterious underworld. Obviously, this person had mastered the law of fire and had the ability to control powerful flames. Boom! Chapter 1342. Palace Master Xiao Yu took a few steps back with an ugly expression on his face. After receiving Du Shan's reminder, Wenbai hurriedly dragged him to Sky Capital Peak in order to find Zhuowen and see if he could trigger a reaction from the Void Immortal Scripture. After arriving at Sky Capital Peak, they saw Xian Zhong going crazy for some reason. He was actually trying to deal with Zhuowen. Although the reason why Xiao Yu had taken Zhuowen as his personal disciple was mostly because of a transaction, Zhuowen was still his personal disciple. Even if it was in name, there was still a deep relationship between him and Xiao Yu. Xian Zhong, the peak master of mysterious underworld peak, was trying to kill Jian Wushuang in front of him, even when he shouted for him to stop. This showed that he didn't put him in his eyes. Therefore, Xiao Yu was furious and the consequences were serious. Xian Zhong, Yun is my new personal disciple. You want to kill him in front of me? Do you think that my mysterious underworld peak has no one? Xiao Yu's voice was extremely cold. On the other side, the battle between the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy and Jian Mu was also separated. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy landed beside Xian Zhong, while Jian Mu came to Mu Qinshue's side and asked with concern, "Junior sister Qinshuo, are you all right?" Mu Qinshuo shook her head. With a step, she came to Zhuowen's side. Looking at the blood at the corner of his mouth and his pale face, her eyes were filled with worry. Jian Mu's face stiffened. Seeing Mu Qinshuo so concerned about Zhuowen, his eyes revealed a trace of sadness. He just quietly looked at Zhuowen and Mu Qinshuo. "I'm fine." Zhuowen waved his hand and forced a smile. "Yun, take this. This pill can temporarily suppress the injuries in your body." Mu Qinshuo was still a little worried. She took out a pill from her spirit ring and considerately put it into Zhuowen's mouth. Zhuowen did not refuse and swallowed it directly. Soon after, he felt a warm current spread out from the elixir. It flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians and circulated around his entire body, causing him to feel warm and indescribably comfortable. A portion of the injuries caused by Xian Zhong had actually recovered. "Qinshuo, what kind of pill is this? It's actually this amazing?" Zhuowen's eyes lit up as he asked. "Qi Nourishing Pill, a low-grade immortal pill. It has an extremely significant effect on injuries," Mu Qinshuo replied softly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Mu Qinshuo's identity was not ordinary, so he was not very surprised that she had celestial pills. At this moment, Xian Zhong, who was originally confronting Xiao Yu, frowned slightly and coldly snorted, "Xiao Yu, I didn't know that this child was your mysterious origin peak's disciple. What do you mean by questioning me?" After saying this, Xian Zhong turned to Wen Bai behind Xiao Yu and respectfully said, "Martial Uncle Wen, why have you come to Sky Capital Peak? Why don't you come to our mysterious underworld peak? Xian Zhong can be a good host." Wen Bai's face was also not very good. He coldly said, "Who allowed you to touch Xun? Also, these two are from the Blue Dragon Hall, right? Why did you bring these two guys into the inner courtyard?" Xian Zhong's face stiffened. He could feel that Wen Bai's attitude towards him was not very friendly. Could it be because of Zhuowen? Greetings to Peak Master Xiao Yu and Senior Wen Bai. This time, Xian Zhong came to Sky Capital Peak for the sake of the inner courtyard. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy spoke. He pointed at Zhuowen with his right hand and continued, "This child is a descendant of Ryuka and has an inseparable relationship with our Blue Dragon Hall. I think the two of you should know better than me what the relationship between Ryuka and Blue Dragon Hall is, right? Therefore, I'm afraid that this child's purpose in entering the inner courtyard is not very pure. I hope the two of you can give face to our Blue Dragon Hall and let us deal with this kid. After this, our Blue Dragon Hall will definitely compensate your inner courtyard well." The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's attitude was rather humble. It could be said that he had given Xiao Yu and Wen Bai enough face. In the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's opinion, Xiao Yu and Wen Bai shouldn't offend the Azure Dragon Palace for a mere Zhuowen. However, the moment the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy raised his head, a slap was suddenly thrown over and landed heavily on his cheek. A crisp sound of a slap resounded. Then, before the crowd's gazes, the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was heavily smashed onto the ground with a dog-eating feces posture. His right cheek was extremely swollen. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was stunned. He held his cheek and raised his head to stare at Xiao Yu. His eyes were almost spitting fire. Xiao Yu had actually slapped him without any warning. This slap had almost caused him to cover his face. Originally, with the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's strength at the 9th level of the Martial Emperor realm, if he had been vigilant, he would have been able to dodge this slap. However, Xiao Yu was known as Madman Xiao in the inner courtyard. Normally, he would not play by the rules. Just now, Xiao Yu had directly slapped the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's face when he was speaking. This slap had directly stunned the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy. "To give face to your mother, you swaggered into our inner courtyard and attacked our inner courtyard disciples without any scruples. Do you think this is your Blue Dragon Hall? Also, do you think we are 3-year-old children? If we give face to you, who will give face to us? Just as the 6th Azure Dragon envoy raised his head and fell to the ground, Xiao Yu suddenly descended and ruthlessly stomped on his chest. The power of law gushed out and directly suppressed the 6th Azure Dragon envoy, causing him to be unable to get up. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy roared fiercely. The power in his body surged out in an attempt to blast Xiao Yu away. However, Xiao Yu was a sage to be. The power of the law of fire on his body was very terrifying. It firmly suppressed the 6th Azure Dragon envoy, causing him to be unable to get up. Still want to resist? I'll teach you to resist, I'll teach you to resist. As he said that, Xiao Yu stomped down again and again. Every stomp landed on the 6th Azure Dragon emissary's head, and he purposely made the 6th Azure Dragon emissary face down. His posture was extremely humiliating. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy roared furiously and struggled with all his might. However, it was useless. His strength was much weaker than Xiao Yu's. Xiao Yu, enough. The corner of Xianzhong's mouth twitched slightly when he saw this scene. Immediately, he let out a low cry. The 6th Green Dragon envoy had once saved him and was his benefactor. Now, Xiao Yu was actually trampling on the 6th Green Dragon envoy because of a mere Inner Academy disciple. This was equivalent to slapping his face. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, I want to ask you right now. Are you a member of the Blue Dragon Hall or the Divine Academy? If you were a member of the Blue Dragon Hall, it would naturally be pardonable for you to speak up for the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. However, you're not a member of the Blue Dragon Hall, yet you speak up for someone from the Blue Dragon Hall. Doesn't that mean? I think you know what I mean. Zhuowen's complexion had improved a lot after eating the pill given by Mu Chenxue. He looked at Xianzhong with slight mockery. Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to interrupt us when we're talking? Xianzhong turned his head. His eyes narrowed dangerously. He suddenly extended his right hand. The law of underworld shot out, turning into black tentacles that swept towards Zhuowen. He had actually attacked Zhuowen without any warning. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, you've gone too far. Mu Chenxue's beautiful eyes were still filled with coldness. Her right hand gently landed on the spiritual ring, as if she wanted to take out something. Zhuowen's expression had become extremely ugly. This Xianzhong had attacked without the slightest bit of mercy, and it was obvious that he wanted to kill Zhuowen. This caused Zhuowen's heart to feel cold. However, Xianzhong's attack did not land. A tall figure stood in front of Zhuowen and Mu Chenxue. The figure gently extended his right hand and the countless black tentacles collapsed. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. The black tentacles were formed by the law of underworld. They possessed extreme yin and extreme coldness, as well as a strong corrosive power. They were extremely difficult to deal with. However, in front of this person, they were actually unable to withstand a single blow. To be able to do this, his strength was definitely above Xianzhong's. Xianzhong was a sage to be. In other words, the figure in front of him was most likely a true sage. Thinking of this, Zhuowen could not help but take another look at the figure in front of him. He was wearing a black robe and his hair was alternating between black and white. He should be around 50 or 60 years old. Zhuowen could not see through his aura at all. In other words, in Zhuowen's eyes, the elder in front of him was simply plain, as if he was just an ordinary elder. Martial Uncle Wen? Xianzhong's eyes narrowed as he stared at the elder in astonishment. In his impression, Wenbai was an existence that would normally not interfere in the matters of the Overlord sect. Today, he had suddenly appeared in Sky Capital Peak and seemed to be standing up for Zhuowen. Could it be that Zhuowen was very important? Xianzhong, have you had enough? Wenbai's voice was very cold. In that cold voice, there was a trace of irritation. Xianzhong frowned and said, Xianzhong does not know what martial uncle means? You don't know what I mean? Wenbai snorted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, the power of laws swept out, causing Xianzhong's expression to change drastically as he retreated. Forcing an inner court disciple and even allowing the Azure Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall to run amok in the inner court. Your actions have already violated the rules of the academy. Since this is your first offense, get the hell back to Sky Capital Peak right now. You're not allowed to take half a step out of Sky Capital Peak for half a year. Xian Zhong's expression changed drastically when he heard Wen Bai's words. Just as he was about to speak, Wen Bai spoke once more. If you don't scram, do you want me to make you scram? Xian Zhong's expression froze. He coldly stared at Zhuo Wen behind Wen Bai, nodded, and planned to leave Sky Capital Peak. As for the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries, he naturally couldn't care less. However, just as he took a step forward, he suddenly raised his head and noticed a terrifying power of laws surging over from the horizon. At this moment, the 6th Azure Dragon envoy was still being ruthlessly ravaged by Xiao Yu. On the other hand, the 7th Azure Dragon envoy stood blankly to the side, not daring to interfere at all. Boom. However, Xiao Yu's ravaging didn't last for long. A terrifying power of laws swept over from above Sky Capital Peak and blasted Xiao Yu away. Xiao Yu took a few steps back and stared at the sky with narrowed eyes. He said, "Who's playing tricks? Why aren't you coming out?" As soon as Xiao Yu spoke, the power of laws surged over from above Sky Capital Peak. The power formed the shape of a translucent head. A pair of empty eyes descended onto Xiao Yu and said, "You should stop before going too far." Hall Master. Chapter 1343. 3 Saints. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy crawled to his feet in a sorry state, his face swollen and bruised. He lowered his head, not daring to look at the sky. "Lord Hall Master." Wen Bai and Xiao Yu both looked up at the sky and stared at the face in surprise. Wen Bai said coldly, "Sapphire Shore, these 2 dogs were indeed sent by you. Do you really think that your Blue Dragon Hall has dominated the entire 9th Netherworld realm? You dare to do whatever you want in my divine Netherworld realm just by sending 2 Azure Dragon envoys?" The gigantic human face turned its head slightly and stared at Wen Bai indifferently. "Wen Bai, I'm only here to ask for this descendant of the Long family. It's your divine Spectre Realms people who are being overbearing. Why are you blaming my Azure Dragon Hall? Whether he's a Ryuka descendant or not, he's now a disciple of our excellent Gods Institute. Your people ignored our inner courtyard and came here to ask for him. They even attacked. Are you not putting my excellent Gods Institute in your eyes?" Wen Bai's voice was cold. The face frowned and said indifferently, "I didn't say that. How about this, everyone take a step back. You hand over Zhuowen, and my Blue Dragon Hall will give you a satisfactory compensation. How about it?" "Uncle Wen Bai, the Blue Dragon Hall Master's suggestion is reasonable. We don't need to offend the Blue Dragon Hall for a disciple. The gains don't make up for the losses. Moreover, this kid's cultivation is only at the 3rd level of the Martial Emperor realm. There are plenty of people at this level in our inner courtyard. It's better to hand him over and get compensation from the Blue Dragon Hall." Xian Zhong hadn't left yet. When he heard that the Blue Dragon Hall Master was here, he couldn't help but advise. "You traitorous dog, Xian Zhong. You've thrown away the face of our divine academy. Even if Zhuowen is only at the 3rd level of the Martial Emperor realm, isn't he a disciple of our inner courtyard? Furthermore, you mean to say that as long as a disciple's cultivation is not very high, our inner courtyard can casually abandon them?" shouted Xiao Yu furiously, pointing at Xian Zhong. Xian Zhong's face looked even grimmer. When the other core disciples below Sky Capital Peak heard Xian Zhong's words, their faces turned ugly as they discussed. They were all disciples of the Divine Grace Academy. Other than seeking higher cultivation realms and resources, they also wanted to obtain the protection of such a huge power. If the Divine Academy couldn't even protect their own disciples, it would only cause the entire academy to be in danger. No one knew when they would offend some power and the academy would directly hand them over to appease the other party's anger. "Martial Uncle Xian Zhong, I want to ask you, if the Excellent Gods Academy doesn't have many disciples, can it still be called a big power in the 9 Netherworld realm? We joined the academy and received the academy's resources to increase our cultivation. Naturally, we are filled with gratitude and believe that this is our home. But if you hand over your disciples because you're afraid of offending other powers, Can the inner courtyard still be your home? I think prison is more appropriate, right? In martial uncle Xianzhong's eyes, do you think the inner courtyard is a prison? The disciples inside are prisoners under your control. You can control their fates as you wish. You can kill them or send them away as you wish. Zhuan raised his head slightly. His gaze was extremely calm as he stared at Xianzhong. His calm and loud voice resounded. Many disciples of Sky Capital Peak were filled with righteous indignation when they heard this. After all, there were very few disciples in the inner court who could reach the high-class emperor realm. Most of them were low or mid-class emperors. Zhuo Wen's experience inevitably made them feel sad for the loss of a rabbit. Xianzhong's face turned green and white. Anyone would be unhappy to be lectured by a junior, let alone Xianzhong, one of the 9 peak masters. Moreover, he couldn't refute Zhuo Wen's words. His actions just now were indeed biased towards the Blue Dragon Hall. If it wasn't for Xiao Yu and Wen Bai guarding Zhuan, Xianzhong would have already taught Zhuan a lesson. Wen is right. As one of the 9 peak masters, you can't even be compared to a junior. Have you been living like a dog all these years? Xiao Yu glanced at Zhuan behind him with admiration. Then he scolded Xianzhong. Wen Bai, who was beside Xiao Yu, also glanced at Zhuan and nodded in satisfaction. When Wen Bai and Xiao Yu rushed to the Sky Capital Peak, they naturally saw Zhuan using the Immortal Path technique. What surprised them was that Zhuan used the void power not only to escape, but also to defend and attack. They had never thought of such a method before. Therefore, the two of them immediately made up their minds. The one who caused the Void Stone tablet to react was most likely Zhuan. How could they hand over such a talent to the Blue Dragon Hall? Moreover, from Zhuan's words just now, it was obvious that Zhuan was a person who valued friendship and righteousness. As long as you respected him, he would respect you 10 times. Wen Bai and Xiao Yu recognized such a grateful disciple from the bottom of their hearts. Xiao Yu, watch your words. I'm just thinking for the academy. Offending the Blue Dragon Hall for a mere disciple is really a loss for the greater good. Xianzhong snorted coldly. If I hand over your Xianming Peak's direct disciple, Xianqi, to the Blue Dragon Hall, would you be willing? In the end, you're just a selfish guy, Xiao Yu said coldly. At this moment, the human face in the sky frowned and said coldly, Wen Bai, are you not going to hand over Zhuan? Wen Bai raised his eyebrows and grinned. What? Sapphire Shore, are you planning to rob in the Divine Spectre realm? With just your law clone, I can deal with it in a few moves. Even if your real body comes, I can still make it so that you won't be able to return. Good, good, good. Looks like you're really going to protect this kid. Sapphire Shore frowned. Although the Divine Academy's foundation couldn't be compared to the Blue Dragon Hall, the difference wasn't that big. Even if he was the strongest saint in the 9th Netherworld realm, he didn't dare to casually barge into the Divine Spectre realm. Right now, he had only sent a law clone. Bush. Another 3 figures flew over from the Sky Capital Peak. One of them was the Peak Master of the Sky Capital Peak, Old Man Tiandu. However, at this moment, Old Man Tiandu was respectfully following behind the other 2 figures, as if he was a junior. The 2 figures walking in front were very old, around 70 to 80 years old. Especially the white-robed old man at the front. His aura revealed a trace of mystery. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary old man, but at second glance, he didn't seem ordinary at all. It was a very strange feeling. Martial Uncle Yanji and Martial Uncle Jiang Xian are here too? Looking at the 2 old men in front of the 3 figures, Xianzhong was stunned and revealed a look of disbelief. These 2 old men and Wen Bai were senior figures in the entire inner yard. They were also experts who were like pillars of the inner yard. They were usually elusive, so why had they all appeared together today? Could it be that they were all here for Zhuan? Thinking of this, Xianzhong's gaze couldn't help but fall on Zhuan. He frowned slightly and no one knew what he was thinking. Yanji, Jiang Xian, the 2 of you are also here. Good, I want one of you. I will give you enough compensation after this. I don't think this request is too much, right? Sapphire Shore's gaze fell on the white-robed old man. He knew that this old man was the dean of the entire Jiaxin Academy and had the final authority to make decisions. As long as this old man agreed, Wen Bai and Xiao Yu's objections would be useless. Yan Ji and Jiang Xian came to Wen Bai's side, while old man Tiandu came to Jian Mu's side and asked in a low voice. Previously, he wasn't at Tiandu Peak, but was a guest at Divine Devil Peak. On the way back, he met Yan Ji and Jiang Xian. The three of them went to Tiandu Peak together and saw this scene. Therefore, he needed to understand the situation. Yan Ji came to Wen Bai's side and the latter whispered in his ear for a while. Soon after, Yan Ji turned his head and smiled at Sun. "You are Zhuowen, right? You are very good. You have just joined Ao Yuan Peak, but you have already mastered the Immortal Path technique." Zhuowen naturally hurriedly returned the greeting. "I was just lucky. Senior, you flatter me. You are neither arrogant nor rash. You have a good temperament." Yan Ji nodded, then turned to look at Sapphire Shore in the sky. "Tun, this is the Dean of the Inner Academy, Senior Uncle Yan Ji. Beside him is Jiang Xian. You should know that person just now is Wen Bai. The three of them are senior figures of the Inner Academy and are all saints. It is a little strange that all three of them have come out." Mu Chenxue was also puzzled. Even if the master of the Blue Dragon Hall had come in person, he was only a law clone. Wen Bai alone was enough. Now that all three of them had come out, it was clearly not just because of Sapphire Shore. Could the three of them have come for Zhuowen? Mu Chenxue began to guess when she remembered that Yan Ji had taken the initiative to talk to Zhuowen. Sapphire Shore's expression was a little ugly, especially when he saw that Yan Ji had ignored him and talked to Zhuowen first. He felt very unhappy, so he said coldly, "Yan Ji, what do you think of my proposal? I will give you a satisfactory price as compensation." Yan Ji smiled faintly and said, "The disciples of my Divine Academy are all priceless. We are a whole. I haven't even settled the debt with you when you came over in such a threatening manner. You actually want to bring up this matter with me? Don't you think it's funny?" When these words were spoken, the disciples of the entire Sky Capital Peak burst into an uproar. The faces of many disciples were flushed red, while their eyes were filled with excitement as they stared at Yan Ji. Clearly, Yan Ji's words were very warm to them, just like a heart-strengthening drug. "Oh, Yan Ji, I have already lowered my voice, and you still intend to refuse? Do you think that your divine nether realm is too big and can fight against my dragon nether realm?" Sapphire Shore's eyes narrowed as he said coldly. Yan Ji was still smiling as he took a step forward. A vast aura, like the sun, spread across the entire mountain peak, the entire inner yard, and even the entire divine specter realm. At this moment, it was as if a blazing sun had risen in the sky of the divine specter realm. The three suns turned into four, their blazing light illuminating the land. Chapter 1344. Sapphire Shore, so strong. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he looked at Yan Ji, who had completely released his aura. The aura he had unleashed was enough to make the fourth sun rise in the divine specter realm. What kind of power did it take to do that? Yan Ji's cultivation was definitely not just at the profound saint realm. Coupled with what Sapphire Shore had said, one could guess that Yan Ji might have already broken through to the heavenly saint realm. "Sapphire Shore, you're not the only heavenly saint in the entire 9 netherworld realm. I, Yan Ji, am the second. If you want to fight the divine specter realm, and I will accompany you." Yan Ji's voice was very calm, but there was a hint of fighting spirit in it. His voice spread across the sky, and countless disciples of the Sky Capital Peak became excited. Sapphire Shore's expression changed slightly as he said in a low voice, "Perhaps you still don't know, but this boy is not only a descendant of the Ryuka, but he also killed the 8th and 10th Blue Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall. The enmity between us is irreconcilable. Do you really intend to start a war between the two netherworld realms for such a disciple?" Zhuowen killed the 10th and 8th Blue Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall? Yan Ji was puzzled as he looked at Zhuowen behind him. This Zhuowen in front of him was only at the 3rd level Great Emperor realm. How could he kill the Blue Dragon Hall's Blue Dragon envoy with such a cultivation? Wasn't it a little unbelievable? Not only Yan Ji, but Wen Bai, Xiao Yu, Xian Zhong, Old Man Tiandu, Jian Mu, and the other disciples of the Sky Capital Peak were also looking at Zhuowen with doubts, doubts, shock, and other emotions in their eyes. Mu Qinshui didn't find it strange. She knew that Zhuowen had a profound saint artifact like the Emperor's Heavenless Sword. It wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the 8th and 10th Azure Dragon envoy. However, the problem was that the energy of the Emperor's Heavenless Sword had been completely exhausted. Is what Sapphire Shore said right? Yanji asked expectantly. Zhuan nodded and said, I did kill them. But they provoked me first. That's why I attacked them. Before speaking, Zhuowen naturally wanted to distance himself from the matter. He was indeed the one who killed the man, but the cause was not his fault. Yanji said, Yen, I can take a step back. That. Yanji. Studio. Of course, I can take a step back. Back then, this kid killed the 8th Azure Dragon emissary. That proves that he is very strong. Let him fight the 7th Azure Dragon emissary. If he wins, I will return immediately. If he loses, he will die. Moreover, this kid cannot use saint artifacts or other external items. He can only rely on himself, Qin Yuan suddenly suggested. Yanji frowned and asked Zhuan, Little guy, did you use a saint weapon to kill the 8th Blue Dragon envoy? Zhuowen nodded with a bitter smile. Back then, I did use a saint artifact. However, that saint artifact was damaged and could only be used twice. I have already used up those 2 chances. Yanji nodded and turned to Sapphire Shore. I can't agree to this. The 7th Blue Dragon envoy of your Blue Dragon Hall is an 8th Heaven Great Emperor. Zhuan is only a 3rd Heaven Great Emperor. The difference is too big. This battle is not fair. Sapphire Shore snorted and said, He killed the 8th Blue Dragon envoy. Do you still not believe in his strength? Yanji still wanted to say something, but Zhuan took a step forward and said coldly, I agree to this battle. However, if I win this battle, you have to leave. You are not allowed to enter the Divine Spectre realm again. Of course, if you lose, you have to die. This battle is still relatively fair, Sapphire Shore chuckled. His lips curled slightly. Zhuan agreed too quickly. Yanji, Jiangxian, Wenbai and Xiaoyu did not react in time, let alone Mu Qinshui. Thank you seniors for your concern. I'm confident in this battle. Zhuan clasped his hands at Yanji, Jiangxian and the others and said gratefully. At the same time, Zhuan also looked at Mu Qinshui, who had a bitter expression. He smiled, Don't worry, I'll be fine. With that, Zhuan suddenly leapt into the air. He looked down at the 7th Blue Dragon envoy and said indifferently, Why don't you get your ass over here? The 7th Blue Dragon envoy was stunned when he heard that. Soon after, he raved with joy and laughed aloud, You reckless thing. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. With that, the 7th Blue Dragon envoy leapt into the air as well. He stared at Zhuowen coldly. Tiangu had already told them how the 8th Blue Dragon envoy had died. He had been killed by this person's saint artifact. Under the premise that he could not use his saint artifact, he was completely confident that he could kill Jian Qin in a few moves. After all, the difference between the 2 of them was extremely great. Arrogant brat, you're basically looking to die. Nearby, Xian Zhong crossed his arms over his chest and sneered. All of the Sky Capital Peak Core disciples were stunned when they saw this scene. Zhuowen was naturally no stranger to them. Many of the Sky Capital Peak disciples had seen him tugging and pulling Mu Qinshui's hand earlier. Many disciples of the Sky Capital Peak had a strange expression on their faces when they saw Yanji taking the initiative to challenge the 7th Azure Dragon envoy. Some of them even shook their heads, thinking that Yanji was too foolish. Yanji was clearly protecting him, yet he still wanted to seek death. Senior Yanji, what should we do? Xiaoyu and I are certain that the strange movement of the spatial stone tablet might have been caused by this person. This is because he used the Immortal Path technique when he was pursued by Xian Zhong. He also used the spatial force to defend and attack with ease, Wenbai whispered to Yanji. Yanji's eyes flickered. He sighed. Since Yun has come out of his own accord, we can only rely on him. However, this kid is not simple. I think he must have some sort of trump card. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to fight the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. I hope so. Wenbai nodded and did not say anything else. Zhuan had already agreed to fight the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. Since they wanted to protect him, it wasn't appropriate for them to interfere. They could only wait and see. Just as everyone's attention was fixed on the battle between Zhuan and the 7th Blue Dragon envoy, a figure walked out of a pavilion not far away from Sky Capital Peak. This person was tall and slender. His clothes were messy and his fair face was filled with laziness. His eyes were drowsy as if he had not yet woken up. This person yawned. He also noticed Zhuan and the 7th Blue Dragon envoy, who were facing each other in the distance. He even saw Old Man Tiandu, Yanji, Jiang Xian and other upper echelons of the inner courtyard. However, this person was not too surprised. He yawned again and casually leaned against a wooden pillar. He muttered, "What's going on today? Sky Capital Peak is so lively. Even Yanji, Jiang Xian and Wenbai are here. Xianzhong, Xiao Yu and Old Man Tiandu are here too. What's going on? And is that the Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore? He only sent a law clone over. How cowardly." With that, this person yawned again and looked at Xu. He said, "I've never seen this guy before. He's a new disciple, right? A 3rd-level Great Emperor against an 8th-level Great Emperor. He's a real man indeed. He's like me back then. Let's see how badly this kid will be beaten." The 7th Blue Dragon envoy looked at Zhuan and said indifferently, "You're lucky to have used a saint weapon to kill the 8th Blue Dragon envoy. However, without a saint weapon, what will you use to fight me? It's better for you to accept your death obediently." With that, the 7th Blue Dragon envoy stepped out of the void and reached for his waist with his right hand. With a swoosh, he pulled out a shiny saber. He rushed in front of Zhuan and slashed. Saber light and sword shadows crushed down from the sky. The rumbling sound was extremely terrifying. Zhuan's expression did not change. He stretched out his right hand and the tiger head deep golden spear was thrown out. The whistling wind turned into a huge tiger head. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, fiercely smashing against the incoming saber. Clang! The sound of metal clashing resounded through the sky. Wisps of sparks burst out from the tip of the spear and the saber. Then the two separated. Zhuan took dozens of steps back while the 7th Blue Dragon envoy only took a few steps back. It was obvious that the 7th Blue Dragon envoy had the upper hand in this exchange. "Old 7, don't hold back. Finish him off cleanly." Sapphire Shore was clearly not satisfied with the current outcome. He transmitted his voice to the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. The 7th Blue Dragon envoy nodded. Immediately, a ray of light burst out from between his eyebrows. A fierce roar swept out from the light. Then, a huge beast floated in the sky. The beast had a dragon head, a horse body, and scales feet. It looked like a lion with grayish-white fur. When it opened its mouth, its tongue was purplish-black. There were rows of barbs on its surface. It looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. "My armor soul is Pai Xiu. Release your armor soul too. Otherwise, you won't have a chance," the 7th Blue Dragon envoy said indifferently. Zhuan ignored the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. Instead, he transmitted his voice to Cheng Huang in his Sea of Consciousness. "Little Huang, can you really use the 8th Blue Dragon envoy's Yuaning to release a sure kill attack?" Cheng Huang patted its chest and said, "Don't worry. The Fushi Cauldron also has an offensive formation. However, it needs a powerful energy to activate it. Since you don't want to expose the existence of the Black Dog, use the Fushi Cauldron. This cauldron has disappeared for tens of thousands of years. No one can recognize it. Moreover, the appearance of the cauldron has changed greatly over time. Although many of the formations are broken, I can still maintain some useful formations with me around." Zhuan nodded when he heard this. Immediately, he pointed his right hand at his forehead and summoned the ordinary-looking Fushi Cauldron. "Where's your dragon soul? Is this broken cauldron also your armor soul?" The 7th Blue Dragon envoy was stunned and asked in surprise. "I don't need a dragon soul to deal with you," Zhuan said irritatingly. "You're courting death." The 7th Blue Dragon envoy flew into a rage. He roared and rushed toward Zhuan with his armor soul, Pai Xiu. The Pai Shio's purplish-black tongue was like a vine. It cut through the void, wanting to sweep up and devour Jun. 8th Blue Dragon Envoy, I'll have to trouble your Yuanying. Chapter 1345. The Law of Lightning. You bastard, what are you doing? The 8th Azure Dragon Envoy's Yuanying cursed at Zhuowen as soon as it appeared. His face was filled with agitation, but before he could finish, Zhuowen stuffed him into the Fushi Cauldron. Inside the Fushi Cauldron, the 8th Azure Dragon Envoy screamed, but he soon lost his breath. That's old 8th's Yuanying? He was indeed the one who killed him. Standing on the head of the Pai Shio, the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy saw the Yuanying that Zhuowen had thrown into the Fushi Cauldron. With a cold snort, the Pai Shio beneath him increased its speed and arrived above Zhuowen's head in an instant. Its huge body was like a dark cloud. Swoosh! The purple tongue wrapped around Zhuowen in a spiral shape. The purple barbs on the surface of the tongue emitted a chilling light, accompanied by a strange purple aura. Zhuowen held the tiger head clear golden spear in his hand. At the same time, the dragon seal in his palm was ready to attack. He was secretly on guard. The armor spirit of the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy was not simple, so he naturally had to be cautious. But at the instant the violet tongue had just arrived before Zhuowen, an extremely terrifying and enormous hand suddenly flashed out from within the Fushi Cauldron. This enormous hand was over 3 kilometers in size and seemed lofty like a mountain. On the surface of the giant hand, the massive dragon horse and the divine turtle rotated around the giant hand in a spiral posture. A vast pressure spread out, causing the entire space to resound with crackling sounds. What is this thing? The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's pupils shrank. He did not expect such a giant hand to extend out from the Fushi Cauldron. Caught off guard, the Pai Shio under his feet crashed into it. This giant hand was even larger than the Pai Shio. The dark cloud-like palm pinched the Pai Shio like a little chick. Then it exerted force, causing the Pai Shio to cry out to the sky. Its huge body collapsed under the force of the giant hand. No, how is this possible? The 7th Azure Dragon Emissary was in disbelief. He stomped his foot and quickly retreated. However, the giant hand was extremely fast. It whizzed over and smashed toward the 7th Azure Dragon Emissary. A strange cracking sound could be heard. Wherever the giant hand passed, the space would shatter like glass. A jade talisman suddenly appeared in the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's hand and he crushed it. His speed suddenly increased and he just happened to escape the range of the giant beast's attack. However, the terrifying wind created by the giant hand still covered the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and his face to turn pale. At the same time, the enormous hand seemed to be lacking in strength, and it swiftly withdrew back into the Fushi Cauldron. However, at that moment, Zhuowen made his move. His right hand streaked across the air, and he disappeared into the void. When he reappeared, he was still behind the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. Then, Zhuowen struck out with his right hand, and the dragon seal in his palm emitted a blazing pitch-black light. Heavenly Dragon! Clang! Numerous thick, black chains shot out from Zhuowen's palms, locking the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy within them from all directions. Damn it! What kind of chains are these? The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy did not notice Zhuowen, who had disappeared into the void. His attention was on the giant hand. When Zhuowen released the Heavenly Dragon Seal, the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy came back to his senses. However, it was too late. He wanted to use brute force to break the chains on his body. However, he realized that the chains were extremely tough. He struggled with all his might, but he could not break them. Moreover, he also discovered that there were small streams of black dragon aura swimming around the chains, maintaining the toughness of the chains. Although he could use his strength to destroy a portion of the chains, the dragon aura could quickly gather together to repair the broken parts of the chains. It's over! Zhuowen held the tiger head clear golden spear in his right hand and suddenly thrust it out. The golden spear tip spun at high speed and instantly pierced the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's heart. Puchi! The spear pierced through the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's body, bringing with it a mist of blood. The seventh Azure Dragon envoy stared at Zhuan and spat out a mouthful of blood. He died with his eyes wide open. Zhuan pulled out the tiger head clear golden spear indifferently and pressed his right hand on the seventh Azure Dragon envoy's dantian. A suction force swept out from his palm and the seventh Azure Dragon envoy's yuaning was controlled by Zhuan. Although the seventh Azure Dragon envoy was also an 8th level emperor, he was stronger than the 8th Azure Dragon envoy. The energy contained in his yuaning was also much richer. At the same time, Zhuo Wen's memory of the hand that had extended from the Fuxi cauldron was still fresh in his mind. If he had guessed correctly, Cheng Huang had used the power of the 8th Azure Dragon envoy's nascent soul to launch an attack. However, he did not know what it was called. Looks like I have to ask Cheng Huang when I return. There are still many unknown things in the Fuxi cauldron, Zhuan muttered to himself. At this moment, the entire sky capital peak became very quiet. Everyone stared blankly at the young man who was holding the 7th Azure Dragon envoy's yuaning in his hand. A 3rd-level emperor against an 8th-level emperor. Everyone was stunned by the outcome of the battle. Of course, more people were curious about the strange jade cauldron that Zhuan had summoned. The giant hand that reached out from it had left a deep impression on everyone. The 7th Azure Dragon envoy's armor soul, Pai Xiao, was unable to resist the giant hand and was crushed into powder. It was a little too terrifying. This jade cauldron should be his armor soul. However, didn't Sapphire Shore say that he's a Ryuka descendant? Shouldn't he have a dragon soul? Xiao Yu licked his lips and said in surprise. Of course, Xiao Yu's voice was mixed with excitement. One must know that Zhuan was his direct disciple. Killing the 7th Azure Dragon envoy in front of everyone was undoubtedly enough to win him face. Moreover, Zhuan was very likely to be the guy who had caused the Void Stone tablet to act strangely. The more Xiao Yu looked at Zhuan, the more he liked him. This time, he has at least 2 armor souls. This jade cauldron is one of them, and the other should be the Ryuka dragon soul. This kid is a talent. Yan Ji, Wen Bai, and Jiang Xian looked at each other and saw a hint of surprise in each other's eyes. Although Zhuowen's cultivation wasn't strong now, the talent he had displayed had surprised the 3 of them. In the future, this kid's achievements might be able to catch up to the number 1 direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak, Yang Yi. This kid's armor soul isn't bad. It can actually unleash such a powerful force. The power of the giant hand just now was comparable to a 9th-level emperor's full-strength attack. With a flip of the hand, it annihilated the 7th Azure Dragon envoy. Not far away, the young man who was originally leaning on the wooden pillar yawned again. His lazy expression turned serious. It seemed that Zhuan wasn't simple. What a ruthless kid. How dare he kill the 7th Azure Dragon envoy? He's courting death. When the crowd fell silent, a furious roar suddenly rang out. Soon after, the crowd saw the 6th Azure Dragon envoy, whose face was swollen with bruises, like a mad dog. His 9th-level emperor aura crushed down and he instantly swept in front of Zhuan. Bastard, how dare you go back on your words? Xiao Yu cursed and took a step forward, wanting to stop the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. Bang. However, before Xiao Yu could take a step forward, he was blocked by an invisible, transparent barrier in front of him. It was a barrier formed by the power of laws. Sapphire Shore, you old bastard, how dare you stop me? Xiao Yu looked up at the face in the sky and roared angrily. This kid is ruthless. He actually killed the 7th Azure Dragon envoy in front of me. He simply doesn't put me in his eyes. What's wrong with letting the 6th Azure Dragon envoy teach this kid a lesson? Sapphire Shore said indifferently. Sapphire Shore, you've gone too far. Yan Ji's expression was ugly. He swept in front of Xiao Yu and slammed his skinny palm into the barrier. Then, the barrier collapsed. Yan Ji was originally at the peak of the profound sage realm. Because he had broken through and become a heavenly sage, although there was a gap between him and the Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore, the gap wasn't too big. In addition, Sapphire Shore was only a law clone at this moment. The barrier created by him couldn't stop Yan Ji, who was already a heavenly sage. There's more? Bastard, Sapphire Shore, did you set this up long ago? The moment the barrier was broken, Yanji wanted to go to Zhuowen's side and stop the sixth Azure Dragon envoy. However, just as he took a step forward, he encountered another barrier. This barrier contained an extremely powerful power of thunder. The law of thunder was a Saint Rune law that Sapphire Shore had comprehended himself. Its power was very terrifying. Even if this was only a barrier created by a law clone, it would take Yanji at least a breath to break it. However, the problem now was that the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of Zhuowen. Yanji couldn't afford to waste a single breath. Die! The sixth Azure Dragon envoy had a cold smile on his face. His body was covered with green scales. His hands turned into two dragon claws and smashed down. His target was Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen calmly picked up the seventh Azure Dragon emissary's nascent soul and stuffed it into the Fushi cauldron. Instantly, the giant hand that appeared just now burst out from the cauldron again. With the dragon horse and the godly turtles circling around it, the giant hand's power was terrifying. However, the smile on the sixth Azure Dragon emissary's face grew even wider. Terrifying lightning suddenly covered his dragon claws. The lightning contained strands of law energy. It was the law of lightning. Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded. Then the entire sky was covered by endless lightning. The giant hand collapsed into nothingness. The sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of Zhuowen. How is this possible? You have the power of law on you? Zhuowen didn't even have time to react. The giant hand collapsed and the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of him. He couldn't help but mumble to himself as if he was sleep-talking. The law of thunder was given to me by the palace master. Therefore, you deserve to die. Chapter 1346. A Battle of Saints, Sapphire Shore, you despicable bastard. Yanji naturally noticed the law of lightning on the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's claw. It was a true Saint Rune law. Anyone below the Saint Realm would not be able to withstand it. There was no doubt that Zhuowen would die under this attack. It was not just Yanji. Xiao Yu, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai, Mu Chenxue, and even the countless core disciples of Sky Capital Peak changed their expressions. No one had expected Sapphire Shore to have such a hidden card. The law of lightning was probably something that Sapphire Shore had secretly given to the sixth Azure Dragon envoy. It was just that no one had noticed. However, it was too late for anyone to help because the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's attack was already very close. In the next moment, the dragon claw covered in the law of lightning was about to land on Zhuowen's body. The latter would definitely die. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. Lightning seemed to fill his entire gaze as the feeling of death approached. Zhuowen's heart was filled with despair. I can't die. Zhuowen roared furiously as a mysterious power surged out from his body, forming a ring-shaped barrier around him. At the same time, the mysterious power grew more and more vigorous. It actually soared into the sky from his head as an extremely mysterious power of law descended from the sky. It was the law of heaven and earth, a power that surpassed the Saint Rune law. Boom! The smile on the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's face reached its limit. Then it froze. He realized that when his dragon claw, which was covered with the law of lightning, was 1 foot away from Zhuowen, it completely froze. It could not move forward at all. What's going on? As soon as he spoke, the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was stunned to discover a terrifying power surging from Zhuowen. The power was like water pressure as it heavily acted on his dragon claw, directly dispersing the law of lightning on his dragon claw. As for the sixth Azure Dragon emissary, he was forced to retreat again and again. His expression was uncertain as he stared at Zhuowen, who was floating in the air and surrounded by mysterious energy. Mystic comprehending state? This kid actually entered the mystic comprehending realm at the moment of life and death. Looks like he's not fated to die yet. Yanji laughed heartily. His originally gloomy mood immediately became much more cheerful. He threw a palm strike, shattering the barrier formed by the laws of lightning in front of him. Afterwards, he took a step towards the human face formed by Qingyu and in the sky. Sapphire Shore, since you are so heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust. I originally planned on letting this nomological avatar of yours leave, but from the looks of it now, that idea is truly laughable. Yenji's loud and clear voice resounded across the sky. Immediately, the face of the person in the sky became extremely ugly. With a sharp howl, he planned to escape into the void and flee. You can't escape. I've grasped the laws of light, so I can see where there's light. You can't escape my detection. With that, an extremely blazing light erupted from Yenji's body. The light soared into the sky and spread in all directions at an astonishing speed. The entire divine nether realm was enveloped by the blazing light. After releasing the light, Yenji snorted coldly. He stepped out of the void and extended his right hand. Endless light gathered to form a giant hand of light that was several hundred feet tall. The hand of light squeezed gently and the surrounding space immediately collapsed. Boom! A frightening thunderbolt shot out from the collapsed space. Soon after, a figure in green robes, whose body was covered in thunderbolts, shot out from the void. His expression was extremely ugly as he stared at Yenji. Yenji, don't go too far. If you dare to destroy this law clone of mine, it means that our two underworld realms have completely fallen out with each other. At that time, I don't know what I will do, Yenji said coldly. The figure was a man wearing a green mask. His hoarse voice was filled with a special magnetism. Go too far? Sapphire Shore, who's the one that's going too far? You sent 2 blue dragon envoys to aggressively come to my inner yard to ask for Zhuowen, and even made a solemn vow to set up a wager. However, Zhuowen won in the end, and you actually went back on your word. You despicable and shameless fellow, you actually said that I was going too far? If I, Yenji, allow this nomological avatar of yours to leave the divine nether realm today, I'll change my surname to yours. With that, Yenji took a step forward. His body erupted with intense light. Afterwards, 4 huge suns descended from the horizon of the divine nether realm and revolved above Yenji's head. Each sun was even larger than the mountain range in the inner academy. Sapphire Shore's eyes flickered. He knew that Yenji was determined to destroy his avatar, so he did not hold back. The laws of lightning circled around his body and terrifying lightning formed a lightning armor on the surface of his body. At the same time, the lightning on Sapphire Shore's body became more and more terrifying. In the end, it was like a black cloud that filled the entire sky, forming a boundless sea of lightning. If that's the case, then let's fight. Sapphire Shore coldly snorted and took a step forward. Every step he took emitted terrifying lightning liquid. As he walked, the vast sea of lightning swirled around him. At this moment, it was as if Sapphire Shore had become the king of this sea of lightning. All of the lightning energy was under his control. Fight. Yenji did not waste any time. The 4 huge suns above his head were controlled by his laws of light as if they were his arms. Boom, boom, boom. The 4 blazing suns and the vast sea of lightning collided in the sky above the divine nether realm. Following that, an earth-shattering explosion resounded. Blazing sunlight and frightening lightning filled the entire sky. At this moment, only the blazing suns and lightning remained in the sky. Everyone's eyes were filled with the blazing suns and lightning. The terrifying power transmitted from the collision spread throughout the entire divine nether realm. It was like an earthquake, causing many people in the divine nether realm to stagger, their faces filled with shock. Between the sea of lightning and the blazing suns, 2 figures were constantly crisscrossing. Every time they collided, it would cause a tsunami-like tremor. The suns in the sky are moving. The sea of lightning is wreaking havoc. 2 figures are fighting. Those are saints. In the divine nether realm, countless cultivators raised their heads. They looked at the terrifying scene in the sky in shock. Some weaker cultivators even trembled and hid far away. However, the shockwaves from this battle between saints spread throughout the entire divine nether realm. There was nowhere to hide. Everyone could only raise their heads to watch this unprecedented battle and try their best to avoid the shockwaves from the battle between the 2 sides. Even the aftermath of a battle between saints was not something that ordinary cultivators could withstand. In the inner courtyard, Jiang Xian and Wenbai leapt into the air. The two of them displayed their respective laws, forming a thick barrier of laws in the sky above the inner courtyard. The battle between Sapphire Shore and Yenji was too terrifying. If no defensive measures were taken, the inner courtyard, which was closest to the battle, would suffer. Sure enough, the instant Jiang Xian and Wenbai set up their defenses, Yenji and Sapphire Shore arrived above the inner courtyard. The earth-shattering aftermath spread out. The entire inner courtyard began to shake violently under the aftermath, causing many disciples to panic. Fortunately, the defenses set up by Jiang Xian and Wenbai were able to block the terrifying aftermath. Otherwise, the aftermath of the battle between the two saints would be enough to cause the inner courtyard to suffer heavy losses. At the same time, the sixth Azure Dragon envoy, whose attack had missed, paled. He wanted to escape, but was caught by Xiao Yu. "Where do you think you're going? You sure have some tricks up your sleeve." If Zhuan hadn't reached the profound understanding realm, he probably would have been killed by your schemes. That Xiao Yu snorted coldly. He slammed his right hand towards the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's head. The laws of fire surged out. Even though the sixth Azure Dragon envoy used his defensive measures, they were like tofu before Xiao Yu's laws of fire. They could not withstand a single blow and collapsed instantly. Under the might of the flames, he was reduced to ashes. Xiao Yu's laws of fire were very domineering. Not only was the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's body destroyed, but even his nascent soul was unable to escape. They were all reduced to ashes. Nearby, Xianzhong opened his mouth when he saw this, but he did not say anything in the end. Although the sixth Azure Dragon envoy had saved his life in the past, he could not even protect himself now. He obviously would not meddle in other people's business and cause more trouble for himself. After killing the sixth Azure Dragon envoy, Xiao Yu raised his head to look at Yenji and Sapphire Shore, who were still fighting in the sky. It was not just Xiao Yu. Everyone in the inner courtyard, and even the Divine Spectre domain, was paying attention to the great battle in the sky. A battle between saints was very rare. It was rare to see one even once in 1,000 years. "Yenji, you're vicious. Do you really plan on destroying this law clone of mine?" An exasperated voice rang out mightily from the sky. Immediately, the terrifying sea of lightning was completely suppressed by the 4 blazing suns. Furthermore, it became more and more compressed. In the end, the sea of lightning was destroyed and Sapphire Shore's voice vanished into the horizon. The blazing light gradually receded, revealing Yenji's slender figure. At that moment, Yenji was like a god of war. The 4 blazing suns above his head illuminated him with endless light, making him seem like a god that had descended to the mortal world. Everyone stared at the majestic figure as reverence filled their eyes. Everyone recognized the figure. He was the strongest saint of the Divine Spectre domain, the dean of the inner courtyard, Yenji. The 3 sons of the Divine Spectre domain were created by Yenji, who grasped the laws of light. He brought light and heat to the Divine Spectre domain. Yenji waved his right hand and 3 of the blazing suns flew out, hanging in the sky of the Divine Spectre domain once again. The 4th sun entered Yenji's body. As the light receded, Yenji was still the ordinary white-robed old man. He slowly took a step forward and landed on Sky Capital Peak. "Senior brother, has Sapphire Shore's law clone been dealt with?" Wenbai asked anxiously the moment Yenji landed. Yenji nodded and smiled faintly. "It's been dealt with. However, Sapphire Shore is probably exasperated right now. Condensing a law clone requires a lot of effort." Chapter 1347. 4th Level Emperor Realm, Humph. Although our Divine Nether Realm is not as strong as the Dragon Nether Realm, Senior Brother Yenji has already broken through to the Heavenly Saint Realm. No matter how bold Sapphire Shore is, he won't dare to attack the Divine Nether Realm. Otherwise, both sides will suffer great losses, Wenbai said coldly. Jiang Xian nodded. Soon after, his gaze landed on the nearby Zhuo, who was still at the profound understanding stage. "This kid is not bad. It's rare to be able to enter the profound comprehension realm in the Imperial Power territory." Yenji followed Jiang Xian's gaze and fell on Zhuo. "Of course. Don't you know whose direct disciple he is? Xiao Yu said shamelessly. The duration of the profound comprehension realm is not fixed. Why don't we wait and see what kind of cultivation this kid can achieve when he comes out? Yanji said. He sat cross-legged in the air and waited quietly. Jiang Xian, Wen Bai, and Xiao Yu naturally followed Yanji's lead. He has entered the profound comprehension realm? Jian Mu slowly landed beside Mu Chenxue. He stared at the young man in the air with a complicated expression. Of course, Jian Mu was more shocked that Yun had killed the 7th Azure Dragon envoy when he was only a 3rd-level emperor. His strength was beyond his expectations. With Jian Mu's current strength, killing the 7th Azure Dragon envoy wouldn't be a problem. However, Zhuowen was only at the 3rd level of the Martial Emperor realm. How could Jian Mu not be surprised when he killed the 7th Azure Dragon envoy who was at the 8th level of the Martial Emperor realm? Mu Chenxue's lips curled into a mesmerizing smile. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on the figure. Old man Tiandu's eyes flickered, revealing a hint of surprise. He had already noticed Zhuowen back then, but because Zhuowen had just entered the inner court not long ago, he had not taken him as a personal disciple. Later on, Xiao Yu beat him to it, so he gave up on the idea of taking Zhuowen as his personal disciple. But today, after seeing the strength that Zhuowen displayed, he slightly regretted not taking Zhuowen in earlier. At the same time, many disciples from the Sky Capital Peak also lifted their heads to look at Tsun. Waves of discussions resounded from the crowd. Clearly, it was likely that Zhuowen's name would spread throughout the entire Inner Academy today. After all, the 3 saints of the inner courtyard had come out because of Zhun, and the hall master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore, seemed to have come because of him as well. Ultimately, the cause of such a huge commotion today was all because of Zhuowen. Therefore, it would be difficult for Zhuowen not to become famous. In the dark hall of the Blue Dragon Hall in the Dragon Wasteland, a stalwart figure sat on the throne in the hall. He groaned as a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Bang! The person slammed his palm on the armrest of the throne. Terrifying power spread, and the rock armrest on his right hand was covered in cracks. You've gone too far. Yanji, don't let me meet you again. You destroyed my law clone. If you fall into my hands, I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. This person was naturally the hall master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore. Originally, he had sent his law clone this time to have an additional layer of protection. Normally speaking, those 3 old fellows of the inner court would probably not refuse him if he stood out and asked for a disciple. But it just so happened that all 3 of them had actually stood out for Zhuowen, and this was truly slightly strange. Moreover, what Sapphire Shore was afraid of was that Yanji had also broken through to the Heavenly Saint realm, becoming the 2nd Heavenly Saint powerhouse in the 9 Netherworld realm. This made Sapphire Shore feel a little troubled. Of course, what Sapphire Shore did not know was that the main reason why Yanji and the other 2 were so protective of Zhuowen was because Zhuowen could cause the Void Stone Steel to move. In other words, this boy had a very high chance of successfully cultivating the Void Immortal Scripture. If Sapphire Shore knew about this, he would probably kill Zhuowen even if he had to pay a huge price. Back then, a peerless genius named Yuanji had appeared in the Divine Academy. Because he cultivated the Void Immortal Scripture, he had turned the Dragon Wasteland upside down. At that time, Yuanji's cultivation was only at the initial stage of the Profound Saint Realm, but his battle prowess was not inferior to Sapphire Shore's, who was at the Heavenly Saint Realm. Furthermore, by relying on his proficiency in the laws of the Void, he could enter the Void at any time and travel tens of thousands of meters in an instant. Even though Yuanji had come to the Dragon Wasteland alone, Sapphire Shore was unable to take him down. This caused Sapphire Shore to be somewhat traumatized by Yuanji even now. Fortunately, Yuanji's temperament was rather carefree. After causing trouble in the Dragon Wasteland for a while, he felt that the 9 Netherworld realm was no longer interesting and went on an adventure midway. Even now, it was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Hallmaster, from the looks of it, you didn't get any good results in the Divine Spectre realm this time. A cold voice came from the depths of the hall. Shortly after, a strange figure surrounded by black gas walked over step by step. It was so silent that not even the sound of footsteps could be heard. Sapphire Shore narrowed his eyes and stared at the figure. He said indifferently, Yen-ji of the Divine Spectre Realm has broken through to the Heavenly Saint Realm. I wonder when you will be able to reach that realm? Skyworm sneered. As long as I have enough flesh and blood energy, my cultivation will naturally advance by leaps and bounds. Right now, I have just recovered to the Emperor Realm. Next, you will need to provide me with the flesh and blood energy of Emperor Realm martial artists. Sapphire Shore slowly narrowed his eyes and stared coldly at the figure in front of him. He said, Do you think that the Emperor Realm is cabbage? Sapphire Shore's expression was extremely ugly. This Skyworm's appetite was huge. Previously, he had devoured thousands of heavenly venerables before barely reaching the Emperor Realm. If this Skyworm wanted to continue advancing in the Emperor Realm, he would probably need quite a lot of Emperor Realm martial artists. Sapphire Shore did not care about heavenly venerables, but Emperor Realm martial artists were very important to him. Furthermore, it was uncertain how many Emperor Realm martial artists Skyworm would need. If he needed several thousand, he really would not be willing to take them out. After all, if he lost so many Emperor Realm martial artists, it would be a huge blow to the Dragon Spectre Realm. Say, Hallmaster, have you forgotten about our cooperation? If I have enough flesh and blood energy, becoming a heavenly saint is only a matter of time. At that time, if we work together, won't we be able to dominate the Nine Spectres realm? Skyworm narrowed his eyes. His voice was filled with bewitchment. Sapphire Shore smiled coldly. Of course, I know that. However, your appetite is like a bottomless pit. I'm afraid that the entire Dragon Spectre realm won't be enough for you to devour. However, Skyworm smiled. He said, Blue Dragon Hall Master, I only want the flesh and blood energy of Emperor Realm martial artists. I don't necessarily need Emperor Realm martial artists from your Dragon Spectre realm. Could it be that the other Spectres realms won't do? Sapphire Shore's eyes lit up. He smiled and said, You're right. I've walked into a dead end. There are many Emperor Realm martial artists in the Divine Spectre realm. There are other Spectres realms that are not bad. Going to other Spectres realms is very dangerous. You should send someone to protect me. Skyworm laughed strangely. Qing Longzi, why don't you accompany Skyworm to other Spectres realms? Also, pay attention to your whereabouts. Don't expose yourself, and don't get close to the main forces of the Spectres realms. You just need to move around, the Hall Master suddenly called behind him. A slender figure slowly walked out. It was Qing Longzi. Even though Qing Longzi did not deliberately release the power of laws, his aura was still extremely heavy and terrifying. Yes, Hall Master. Blue Dragon Hall Master was expressionless. He cupped his hands slightly and stared indifferently at Skyworm before him. With this kid here, I'm relieved. As long as the saints of the Spectre's realm don't move, I think the two of us should be able to escape. Skyworm laughed strangely. Sapphire Shore nodded and continued, In that case, be careful. Don't cause too much of a commotion. My law clone was destroyed by that bastard Yen-ji. Otherwise, I could have gone with you. No wonder you're in such a bad mood. It turns out that your law clone was destroyed. Don't worry. When my cultivation is strong enough, I'll avenge you. Skyworm's eyes twinkled. We'll talk about this later. You guys go first. Be careful. Sapphire Shore waved his hand. Clearly, he did not want to waste too much time talking about this. Qing Longzi obeyed and left the hall with Skyworm. 3 days. During these 3 days, Yuan had been in the profound understanding state. The power of the laws of heaven and earth poured into his body, absorbing the Yuan Qi around him with an earth-shattering momentum. Around Zhuo Wen's body, a primordial Qi hurricane was formed. His robes fluttered in the wind. Boom! A muffled sound rang out. Immediately, Zhuo Wen's aura was much stronger than before. It was like a river before, but now it was like an ocean. He broke through. Yen-ji slowly opened his eyes and stared at the young man floating in the air. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. Zhuan was originally a 3rd-level Great Emperor. Now that he had broken through to the 4th-level Great Emperor realm, He had officially entered the ranks of the middle-level Great Emperor realm. His strength would definitely be much stronger than before. As Zhuo slowly opened his eyes, a blazing light was emitted from them. Soon after, he felt that his entire body was filled with surging energy. This energy was much stronger than before. You've entered the profound understanding state and used it to break through to the fourth-level Great Emperor realm. Xiao Hei's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. I see. Zhuowen also recalled what happened 3 days ago. He should have entered the profound comprehending realm at the moment of life and death under the fatal attack of the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. However, what happened next, he was completely clueless as to what was going on. However, at this moment, Xiao Hei was narrating the events of that day in his mind. A battle between saints? Senior Yan Ji and the master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore, had a great battle? Zhuowen's eyes widened. It was a pity that he had not been able to witness such a great battle. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After Zhuowen woke up, several figures flew over. Yan Ji, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai, Xiao Yu, Mu Chenxue, Jian Mu and Old Man Tiandu. As expected of my direct disciple. Amazing, amazing. You have the same demeanor as I did back then. Xiao Yu patted Zhuowen's shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. Immediately, he turned to the crowd and said, "This is my disciple. Do you see him?" Chapter 1348. Choosing a main peak. While Xiao Yu was praising Zhuowen, Old Man Tiandu came to Zhuowen and said with a smile, "Hin, my Tiandu peak is the strongest peak of the 9 peaks, and the strongest cultivation method of Tiandu peak is the heavenly ask ancient scripture. And Ao Yuan peak is the weakest peak. Although the void immortal scripture is strong, it's not easy for ordinary people to comprehend it. Even Ao Yuan peak's peak lord hasn't comprehended it. Also, Ao Yuan peak often has core disciples transferred to other peaks. I think you're a smart person. Moreover, Ao Yuan peak requires both spiritual power and spiritual power. Even if you cultivate spiritual power, your cultivation won't be too deep. It's not worth it to waste energy on 2 aspects. It's better to cultivate the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture in my sky capital peak. Its requirements are much lower than the void immortal scripture." Speaking until here, Old Man Tiandu put his hands behind his back and smiled with an expression of victory in his hands. Xiao Yu's face suddenly turned green. He jumped up and pointed at Old Man Tiandu and said, "Bullshit, Old Man Tiandu, do you have any shame? Yun is a disciple of Ao Yuan Peak. How dare you openly snatch him? Do you have any shame?" Xiao Yu came to Zhuowen's side and said in a low voice, "Hyun, their Tiandu Peak's heavenly ask ancient scripture is much weaker than the void immortal scripture. Moreover, Tiandu Peak has 4 direct disciples. This old man will definitely lose sight of one and it won't be good for your development. Ao Yuan Peak has few disciples. When the time comes, they will cultivate you with all their strength. Moreover, don't you want to cultivate the void immortal scripture? It contains the laws of the void. Who knows how many times stronger than that bullshit heavenly ask ancient scripture? Moreover, I can help you become an arcane heavenly master in a short time. Don't worry, don't be deceived by Old Man Tiandu." Xiao Yu's words were belittling Tiandu Peak's heavenly ask ancient scripture. Old Man Tiandu's face stiffened. "Xiao Yu, are you itching for a beating? I haven't beaten you for many years, and you're jumping around like this." Old Man Tiandu said coldly. "Come, I'm not afraid." Xiao Yu sneered. "Hey, you two, stop arguing. I have something to ask Zhuowen." Yan Ji, Old Man Tiandu and Old Man Tiandu Peak's immortal scripture. Yan Zhu was, "Yun, can you show immortal Tao immortal scripture? Immortal, immortal immortal heavens immortal, 10 immortal heavens immortal celestial and disappeared immortal 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 immortals immortal immortal heavenly immortal you immortal immortal was heavenly immortal heavens. Immortal 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 immortal, 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 immortal heaven immortal heaven immortal." When Zhuowen reappeared, he was already dozens of meters away. "You have just joined the mysterious Yuan Peak." It is extremely rare for you to be able to master the Immortal Path technique so skillfully. However, you seem to have used the Void Force for defense and attack before. Can you demonstrate it again? Yen-ji nodded and suddenly asked with blazing eyes. Yun was startled, then nodded. When I was comprehending Immortal Tao Immortal Scripture, I found that the power of the Void was only used for escape. I just suddenly wondered if the power of the Void could be used for attack. So I tried it, but the attack method was not perfect. As he spoke, Zhuo Wen's celestial power gushed out and connected to the Void. Instantly, the Void within a radius of several zhang around him shattered. The shattering power was very strong, and anything within that range would probably be shattered into pieces. This method could be used for both attack and defense, but it had a certain limitation. It could only be used within one's own range. If it was far away, it couldn't attack at all. I see. Yen-ji showed a look of understanding. Xiao Yu and Old Man Tian Du both want you to be their personal disciple. Which peak do you want to join? Old Man Tian Du and Xiao Yu both showed a look of anticipation. Zhuan glanced at the two and chose Xiao Yu without hesitation. He was much more interested in the Void Immortal Scripture than the Heavenly Ask Ancient Scripture. After all, Xiao Yu had bragged to him about Ao Yuan Peak. Yuan Ji was the only one who had successfully cultivated the Void Immortal Scripture. Back then, even the Lord of Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore, couldn't do anything to Yuan Ji. From Xiao Hei's description, Yun knew that the Lord of Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shore, was the strongest saint in the 9 Netherworld realm. His cultivation had reached the Heaven Saint realm. If Sapphire Shore came in person, even Yen-ji would find it difficult to stop him. However, Sapphire Shore couldn't do anything to Yuan Ji. It could be seen that the former knew how to escape, and the Void Immortal Scripture was also extremely magical. Yun looked calm and said, I choose Ao Yuan Peak. I think Ao Yuan Peak is more suitable for me. Not bad, not bad. As expected of my good disciple. Choosing Ao Yuan Peak is definitely the best choice in your life. Xiao Yu laughed heartily. Old Man Tiandu was slightly disappointed, but he quickly regained his composure. He had already expected this. After all, Zhuo had taken the initiative to join Ao Yuan Peak. This boy should have come for the Void Immortal Scripture. When he found that he couldn't cultivate the Void Immortal Scripture, he should choose to leave Ao Yuan Peak. At that time, it would be the same to invite this boy to Tiandu Peak. However, he was still a little unwilling and tried to ask, spiritual power is more difficult to cultivate than origin power. Although you have mastered the Immortal Tao technique, you will have to cultivate origin power and spiritual power at the same time in the future. At that time, your cultivation speed will be slower than others. Moreover, Xiao Yu is only a grand heavenly arcanist. He is not an Arcana Saint Master. How can he help you reach the Arcana Heavenly Master level in a short time? This old man is bluffing. When Xiao Yu heard this, he immediately blew his beard and glared. Just as he was about to speak, Jun took a step forward and smiled confidently. I don't need Master Xiao Yu to help me. I am already an Arcana Heavenly Master. As soon as these words came out, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at Jun strangely, their eyes full of doubt and disbelief. How old was Jun? At this age, it was already a genius for his spiritual power to reach the 6th level. It was impossible for him to be an Arcana Heavenly Master. Jun, I am very pleased that you have joined Ao Yuan Peak, but you can't brag. It won't be good if your bragging is exposed. Xiao Yu came to his senses and winked at Zhuan. However, Zhuo completely ignored Xiao Yu. The mental energy in his Naiwen palace surged out and formed an extremely violent mental energy storm around him. The mental energy was like the might of the heavens as it spread out. It was extremely terrifying. Xiao Yu, who was winking at him, suddenly stiffened. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Elder Tiandu was also stunned and fell into silence. Mu Chenshue's beautiful eyes curved into crescents, blooming with a sweet smile. Zhuan had told her long ago that Yun was an Arcana Heavenly Master, so she was not very surprised. Even the Yen-ji elder's hands trembled, revealing a dumbfounded expression. Of course, this expression of the 3 elders was only fleeting, and they soon recovered their calmness. You are really an arcana heavenly master. Although you are in the small heavenly realm, you are still so young. I suddenly realized that I have lived for nearly 100 years in vain. Xiao Yu knelt down again. His mood was extremely complicated at this moment. He didn't expect that the personal disciple he casually accepted because of a transaction would have such a terrifying talent. Your martial Dao talent is so strong, but even your spiritual power talent is so abnormal. How can you let others live? Master Xiao Yu, I am not bragging. I am just stating the facts. Zhuan stared at Xiao Yu and said seriously. Looking at Zhuowen's serious expression, Xiao Yu only felt a headache. Why did he feel that Zhuowen's expression at this moment was filled with ridicule? It must be an illusion, it must be an illusion. He, fourth heavenly emperor realm and an arcana heavenly master. Zhuon joining mysterious origin peak is indeed the best choice. Tiandu, don't compete with Xiao Yu. Yanji laughed. Elder Tiandu's mouth revealed a trace of bitterness. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, martial uncle. Tiandu is also a reasonable person. I will not compete with you again." While Elder Tiandu and Xiao Yu were enthusiastically trying to recruit Zhuon, Xianzhong's face was slightly ugly. He was preparing to leave Sky Capital Peak, not daring to stay here for long. Speaking of which, the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries were brought here by him. If Yan Ji pursued this matter, it would be too late for regrets. Therefore, it was better to leave first. Xiao Yu's eyes were sharp. Naturally, he saw Xianzhong preparing to leave. He hurriedly said, "Xianzhong, why are you leaving? Is it because you have a guilty conscience?" Xianzhong's figure stiffened. He immediately turned around and said coldly, "Xiao Yu, don't talk nonsense. I have something important to do in Mysterious Origin Peak, so I need to go back to deal with it." Something important to do in Mysterious Origin Peak? I think you have a guilty conscience. You were the one who brought the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries here, right? Now that the matter is over, you, the initiator, are planning to leave just like that. Xiao Yu mocked and ridiculed. Xianzhong narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Xiao Yu, you'd better not slander others." Slander others? Xianzhong, there are so many people here. Do I still need to slander others? Do you want me to find someone to discuss whether I am slandering others? Xiao Yu said indifferently. I was muddle-headed for a moment. Martial Uncle Wenbai told me to go back to Mysterious Origin Peak and reflect on my mistakes. I can't leave the mountain for half a year. I plan to go back now. Xianzhong coldly snorted. At this moment, Yuan came to Xiao Yu's side and coldly stared at Xianzhong. Xianzhong had planned to kill him before. How could Yuan let Xianzhong leave just like that? Martial Granduncle Yanji, not only did Martial Uncle Xianzhong bring the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries to capture me, he even tried to kill me. If it wasn't for Master Xiao Yu's arrival, I would already be a corpse. Zhuowen's voice was very cold. This caused Yanji to narrow his eyes and say, "Xianzhong, is that true?" Chapter 1349. Mysterious Underworld Orb, Distorting the Truth? Xianzhong, has your heart been eaten by a dog? You even used the power of the Saint Rune Law. Which cultivator below the level of an invincible sovereign lord could withstand your attack? Xiao Yu cursed. Xianzhong, I was there too. Don't deny it, Wenbai said indifferently. Xianzhong's face was slightly pale as he said in a deep voice, I was possessed. I will return to the mysterious underworld peak to reflect on my mistakes. Since Wenbai had spoken, Xianzhong knew that it was useless for him to quibble. After all, Wenbai was someone who stood at the top of the inner courtyard. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, can't you show some sincerity in your apology? Because of you, my defensive emperor artifact, the divine thorned armor, was shattered. I don't have anything to protect my life now, Von suddenly said. You want to ask me for a defensive emperor artifact? Who do you think you are? Xianzhong glared at Zhuan and said in an extremely unfriendly manner. Xianzhong, since you were in the wrong first, you should compensate Zhuan for his loss. I remember that your mysterious underworld peak has a defensive treasure called the mysterious underworld orb. Although it's not an emperor artifact, its defensive power is extremely strong. Take it out and compensate Zhuowen, Yanji suddenly said indifferently. Xianzhong's face turned extremely ugly. The mysterious underworld orb was one of the top 3 treasures in their mysterious underworld peak. It was an orb that he had refined using the mysterious underworld law. Xianzhong originally planned to give the orb to his direct disciple, Xianqi, when he reached the 9th level sovereign realm so that he could feel the mysterious underworld law in the orb. Not only could the mysterious underworld orb protect its owner, but its owner could also use the mysterious underworld law in the orb to attack to a certain extent. Although it couldn't be compared to Xianzhong himself, ordinary 9th level sovereigns would find it difficult to injure the owner of the mysterious underworld orb. Martial Uncle Yanji, I was planning to give the mysterious underworld orb to Xianqi this. Xianzhong said hesitantly. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Hurry up and take it out. Since you were in the wrong, you should show some sincerity, Xiaoyu said impatiently. Although Yanji did not say anything, his sharp gaze landed on Xianzhong, causing the latter's face to stiffen. This is the mysterious underworld orb, I will take it. In the end, Xianzhong still took out the mysterious underworld pearl. After tossing it to Zhuowen, he left Capital Sky Peak without looking back. Zhuowen extended his hand to receive the mysterious underworld orb. The moment he touched it, he felt a bone-chilling chill spread across his palm. This chill even contained traces of black qi. Underworld Law, Xian Underworld Law, Xian Underworld Law, Xian Underworld Xian Exuan Xian, Stone. This mysterious underworld orb is more powerful than an ordinary high-level emperor weapon. Even a 9th level emperor realm expert would find it difficult to break the defense of this mysterious underworld orb. Take good care of it. It may be of great use in the future, Xiaoyu said with a smile. Zhuo nodded. Then, he came to Mu Qinshue's side. He reached out his right hand to hold the latter's white hand and placed the mysterious underworld orb in her palm. He smiled and said, Qinshui, this is for you. I feel that you need this mysterious underworld orb more than I do. The cold poison in Mu Qinshue's body had not been completely expelled. She could not display her full strength. In such a state, Mu Qinshui needed a strong layer of protection. Xiaoyu, Yanji, and the rest were surprised. They did not expect that Zhuowen would give something as important as the mysterious underworld orb to Mu Qinshui. He was really bold. Mu Qinshui was also stunned. She pushed the mysterious underworld orb to Zhun and said, I already have a protective treasure on me. The mysterious underworld orb is superfluous to me. Take it. However, Zhuowen shook his head firmly. He said in a deep voice, It's not enough. An additional protective treasure is an additional layer of protection. You're my woman. Although I can't give you the best, I can give you the best that I can obtain. This is my sincerity. You have to accept it. Mu Qinshui opened her mouth. However, when she saw the determination in the young man's eyes, she sighed and kept the mysterious underworld orb. Soon after, she retrieved a golden feather from her bosom and handed it to Zhun. You said it yourself. An extra protective treasure is an extra layer of protection. You're my man. Although I can't give you the best, I can give you the best I can get. This is my sincerity and you must accept it. As she spoke, a trace of craftiness appeared in Mu Qinshue's beautiful eyes. A gentle smile blossomed on her cherry-red lips. Zhuowen was stunned. Then he broke out into laughter and accepted the golden feather from Mu Qinshui. This scene made many people secretly envious. Regardless of whether it was the mysterious underworld orb or the golden feather, they were both extraordinary items. Ordinary people would not even consider giving them to others, even if that person was their lover. After all, everyone had their own selfish motives. However, Zhuowen and Mu Qinshui were so honest with each other. Their actions of being considerate of each other touched the hearts of many people. Even Jian Mu, who was silently watching from the back, was stunned. He suddenly felt that the young man and woman before him were so compatible. After regaining his senses, Jian Mu laughed at himself. He slowly retreated and left the square. However, Jianmu did not go far before a palm landed on his right shoulder. Eldest senior brother. Jianmu turned his head and looked at the lazy young man in front of him as he exclaimed in shock. The lazy young man crossed his arms and sized Jianmu up. He said, "Your dream lover is now whispering sweet nothings to another boy. Why don't you fight for her and snatch Mu Chenxue back?" Jianmu smiled bitterly and said, "Her heart is not with me at all. What's the use of snatching her back? Besides, I also feel that Zhuowen is not bad. I'm just an extra person." The lazy young man rubbed his chin and yawned. He said, "You seem to have gotten over it. Do you want to consider the suggestion I gave you before?" Thought. Emotionlessness? Jianmu's gaze froze as he said, "Hee, you should be able to make up your mind to cultivate this law now, right? This law is very suitable for a sword cultivator like you. The sword is emotionless. Cultivating the law of emotionlessness will only make your sword sharper and stronger," the lazy young man said indifferently. Jianmu's eyes flickered as he nodded and said, "Eldest senior brother, I accept your suggestion. Perhaps I should really cultivate the law of emotionlessness." As he spoke, Jianmu finally looked at the beautiful woman who was holding hands with Yun. He sighed softly and left the square. His back was filled with loneliness. A person with emotions who cultivates the law of emotionlessness may be able to release an extremely powerful force. I wonder what kind of achievements Jianmu will achieve in the end? The lazy young man yawned again and left the place. "Jun, come back to mysterious Yuan Peak with me. There are some things that we need to verify," Xiao Yu suddenly said. "What things?" Yuan asked in surprise. "You'll know when you get there," Xiao Yu said with a smile. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. After bidding farewell to Mu Chenxue, he left with Xiao Yu. To Zhuowen's surprise, Yan Ji, Jiang Xian and Wenbai also followed them to mysterious Yuan Peak. In the courtyard of the wooden house on the central platform of the top floor of mysterious Yuan Peak, Lu Qing paced back and forth with a hint of panic in her beautiful eyes. She naturally saw the commotion in the inner court and the battle between the saints clearly. She did not know what had happened at Sky Capital Peak. As Jiang Xian and Wenbai had sealed off the entire inner court, Lu Qing had intended to leave mysterious Yuan Peak and go to Sky Capital Peak. However, she did not succeed. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. 5 figures descended from the sky and landed in front of Lu Qing. "Master, Zhuowen, martial uncles Jiang Xian, Yan Ji and Wenbai?" Lu Qing asked in surprise. Xiao Yu nodded at Lu Qing and hurried to the void stone tablet with Yun. He said, "Yun, try to cultivate the immortal path technique in front of the void stone tablet." Yan Ji and the other 2 followed closely behind Xiao Yu and stared at Zhuowen with anticipation. Jun felt goosebumps rising all over his body when he felt the burning gazes of the 4 people. Although Zhuowen felt that the actions of the 4 people were rather strange, he still did as he was told. He first glanced at the void stone tablet in front of him. He knew that the void immortal scripture should be hidden inside. Then, Yun sat cross-legged on the ground and began to cultivate the immortal path technique silently. His consciousness sank into the scroll that recorded the immortal path technique, and he fell into a state of selflessness. Rumble. The moment Zhuowen's consciousness sank into the scroll, Xiao Yu and the other 3 were shocked to find that the motionless void stone tablet began to shake more and more violently. It even spread to the entire mysterious Yuan Peak. The strange movement of the void stone tablet was indeed caused by this kid. Yan Ji was stunned at first, but then he revealed a joyful expression. Xiao Yu and the other 2 were naturally overjoyed. As for Lu Qing, who was standing by the side, her beautiful eyes stared in shock at the constantly shaking void stone tablet. She covered her cherry lips with her jade-like hand and was unable to speak for a long time. Although she had previously guessed that the strange movement of the void stone tablet had something to do with Zhuowen, she had forgotten about it when she recalled that Zhuowen had just joined mysterious Yuan Peak. Only now did she realize that she was completely wrong. After a while, the strange movement of the void stone tablet stopped. Zhuowen also slowly opened his eyes and saw Yan Ji and the other 3 staring at him. The four of them looked as if they were looking at a naked beauty, which made Zhuowen feel a chill in his heart. The four of you, why are you staring at me like that? Zhuowen asked worriedly. Chapter 1350. Tai Sha Dragon Seal. Zhuowen nodded. He didn't try to hide it. His goal was indeed the Void Immortal Sutra. If that's the case, you should come here more often. If you can successfully cultivate the Void Immortal Sutra, you'll be able to fully grasp the law of the void, Yanji said with a smile. Zhuowen was stunned. He asked curiously, isn't the power of the law something that only high-level great emperors can begin to comprehend? I'm only a 4th-level great emperor now. There's still a gap between me and high-level great emperor. Can I cultivate it successfully? That's just a common saying. Although you're only a 4th-level great emperor, you're already a high-level great emperor. You can still comprehend the power of the law. After all, there are still geniuses in this world, Yanji said. Right. Zhuowen, you have to work hard. If you can successfully cultivate the Void Immortal Scripture, I'll directly remove that trash Xiaoyu's position as the peak master and give it to you. How about that? Wenbai interrupted. Xiaoyu flew into a rage. Although he wasn't as strong as Wenbai, he still wanted to fight Wenbai. Of course, the result was that Xiaoyu was beaten to the ground. Martial Uncle Yanji, I heard that Ao Yuan Peak's Yuanji succeeded in cultivating the Void Immortal Sutra. How long did he take? Zhuowen asked curiously. If I remember correctly, that guy took more than 10 years. He's much stronger than us old guys who have been cultivating for hundreds or thousands of years. Moreover, Yuanji is extremely afraid of trouble. He directly gave the position of Ao Yuan Peak's peak master to Xiaoyu. Look at what he's done to Ao Yuan Peak now. Wenbai had just finished torturing Xiaoyu when he arrived in front of Zhuowen. Yanji nodded. He stared at Zhuowen with bright eyes and said, you're the second disciple in the inner yard who can cause the void stone tablet to move. Perhaps you can be like Yuanji and successfully comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra. Of course, we'll train you well while you're comprehending the Void Immortal Sutra. Although Ao Yuan Peak is the weakest of the 9 peaks, the resources we'll give you won't be less than the other peaks. In fact, we'll give you more. Zhuowen was stunned. He finally knew that the reason why the Yanji 3 elders were willing to fall out with Sapphire Shore was for a mere disciple to him. Was because of the Void Immortal Sutra. After all, the strength that Yuanji displayed after cultivating the Void Immortal Scripture was obvious to all. Therefore, if another peerless figure like Yuanji appeared in the inner yard, the divine nether realm might directly surpass the dragon nether realm and become the #1 great nether realm in the 9 netherworld realm. What if I'm unable to comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra in the end? Zhuowen suddenly asked calmly. He wasn't someone who belittled himself. The Void Immortal Sutra had stumped countless geniuses in the inner yard. Although Zhuowen was talented, he wasn't very confident. That was why he raised this question. It's okay if you can't comprehend it. After all, you've tried your best. We'll do our best to train you because your strength and talent are the best. Yanji smiled. Hearing this, Zhuowen's heart warmed. Yanji and the other 2 elders were quite generous. Perhaps it was as Yanji had said. He really did treat Excellent Gods Academy as his home and the disciples of the academy as his family. After discussing with Yanji and the others, Zhuowen left. The Void Immortal Sutra in the Void Stone Tablet wasn't something that could be comprehended in a day. It required a gradual process. After returning to the residential area, Zhuowen found Du Shan in the courtyard. His moves were very strange and unnatural. Zhuowen also found that Du Shan's moves were somewhat familiar. As he neared, Du Shan also discovered Zhuowen. Zhuowen was stunned to discover that Du Shan was like a rat crossing the street. He suddenly scurried into the bamboo house and directly closed the door after entering the room. What is this guy doing? Zhuowen was startled. Soon after, he shook his head and laughed involuntarily. He ignored Du Shan's strange actions as he opened his door and entered his room. He had just advanced to the 4th layer Emperor realm. He needed to consolidate his cultivation. When Du Shan saw Zhuowen entering the room as if nothing had happened, he let out a sigh of relief and muttered, "Could it be that Zhuowen saw my moves just now? If he said that I stole his moves, would he blame me? Wait, why did Juon his aura become stronger again? He has reached the 4th layer Emperor realm. Du Shan, who was peeking, realized that Juon his aura had become even stronger. Isn't this too fast? Du Shan was stunned. He remembered that Juon had just broken through to the 3rd layer Emperor realm. Now, he had broken through to the 4th layer Emperor realm. This speed was too exaggerated. It must be the effect of the strange moves that Juon his Majesty realm. I must remember it and practice it every day. Perhaps my progress will be similar to Zhuowen's. Du Shan's eyes were filled with determination. He began to practice the moves that Juon his Majesty realm had casually shown him. In the room, Juon his Majesty realm sat cross-legged on a praying mat. After setting up a concealment array, he summoned Xiao He and said expectantly, "Xiao He, I have broken through to the mid-level Emperor realm. I should be able to learn the 2nd dragon skill now, right?" At the same time, Juon his Majesty realm summoned the Fushi Cauldron. Cheng Huang, the fox, was lying lazily on the divine turtle's back with its legs crossed. Xiao He nodded. "Now, I will teach you the 2nd dragon skill. First, use the dragon seal in your hand." Zhuowen extended his right hand when he heard this. The dragon seal in his palm rushed out with a swoosh sound under Xiao He's command and floated in front of Xiao He. Xiao He's expression was solemn. With a wave of its little paw, strands of black energy flew out and entered the dragon seal. After about 10 breaths, Xiao He returned the dragon seal to Zhuowen his Majesty realm and said, "I have engraved the 2nd dragon skill into the dragon seal. Place your palm on your forehead and you will be able to receive the information of the 2nd dragon skill. When the time comes, just follow the information inside and learn it. This dragon skill is much more domineering than the heavenly dragon seal. Use it carefully in the future." When his gaze fell on Cheng Huang as he said in a deep voice, "Senior Cheng Huang, what was that giant hand that the Fushi Cauldron released on Sky Capital Peak? It was so powerful." Cheng Huang was stunned and its eyes flickered. That was a true body that Master left in the cauldron. Because the Jade Cauldron was too damaged, it couldn't unleash its full power. But after I repaired it, it can still be used. Unfortunately, the energy of an 8 heavenly monarch realm cultivator's nascent soul is too little. It can only manifest one arm of the true body. You can find more energy in this aspect in the future so that you can unleash the true power of the Fushi Cauldron. As it finished, Juon his eyes twitched. A mere arm was able to kill an 8 heavenly monarch realm 7th Azure Dragon envoy in an instant. This Fushi true body was indeed terrifying. Furthermore, Juon his curiosity was piqued. If the Fushi Cauldron was this powerful, what cultivation level was Fushi in the past? Only the nascent soul? Asked Zhuo in his surprise. Not necessarily. It's fine as long as it's energy. For example, supreme-grade spirit stones. But the energy consumption is huge. It's not as practical as a nascent soul. Cheng Huang pouted, causing Zhuo his eyes to roll. This guy really knows how to talk. How could an 8 heavenly monarch realm cultivator's nascent soul be so easy to obtain? Moreover, from Cheng Huang's tone, an 8 heavenly monarch realm nascent soul was far from enough. Actually, your own Yuan Qi can also unleash the Fushi Cauldron's true body's energy. But I'm afraid the consumption is not something you can bear. Once you've become a saint, you'll probably be able to fully unleash the Fushi true body, said Cheng Huang calmly. Zhuo his true body took a deep breath and shook his head with a bitter smile. The saint realm was still quite far away from him. Xiao He made it sound so easy. With a sigh, his gaze landed on the dragon seal. Then, he placed his right palm between his eyebrows and a stream of information appeared in his mind. Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal. Zhuo his true body murmured. The second dragon skill that Xiao He taught him was called the Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal. It was said that the Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal was refined from the soul and flesh of an extremely powerful slaughter saint dragon in ancient times. The Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal contained the powerful might of the slaughter saint dragon. Its murderous aura was monstrous and extremely terrifying. Zhuo his true body flipped his right hand and the dragon seal in his palm turned blood red. Muffled dragon roars surged out from the blood-red dragon's roars, containing an extremely terrifying murderous intent. A cultivator with a weak will would probably be frightened by the dragon's roars filled with murderous intent. Their strength would probably be weakened by a few %. What a tyrannical dragon seal! Why do I feel that there seems to be something extremely powerful hidden within this dragon seal that wants to break out of the seal? Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank and his right hand began to tremble involuntarily. A blood-red light shot out from his palm. The dim room was flooded by the blood-red light, making it look exceptionally strange. If you want to use the Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal, then you have to use powerful strength to suppress the Supreme Slaughter Chi. If you can suppress it, then you can completely master the Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal. Otherwise, it will be difficult. Xiao He suddenly laughed. Zhuo Wen almost slapped him when he saw that smirk on his face. I can't do it here. I have to find a more spacious place. With that, Yuan, his true body, suddenly stood up, opened the door and ran out. Fortunately, there were few people on Mysterious Origin Peak. Although Zhuan, his true body, was filled with blood-red light, no one noticed it. Zhuan, his true body, remembered that the northern side of Mysterious Origin Peak was an empty wasteland. He also remembered that there was a waterfall there. He knew that it would be the best choice to go there. Zhuan, his true body, was very fast. In an instant he swept to the northern wasteland. At the end of the wasteland, there was a cliff that was a few hundred feet high. A long waterfall hung at the top of the cliff. Chapter 1351. The Unlucky Blood Demon. As soon as he arrived at the wasteland, Yuan stopped suppressing the power of the dragon seal in his palm. Then, a blood-red light shot out and a clear dragon roar resounded around the wasteland. Then, Yuan felt a heat in his palm. Then, the blood-red light that shot out from the dragon seal wriggled like blood and turned into a huge blood dragon. As soon as the blood dragon was formed, it swooped down. The killing power spread all over its body and enveloped Yuan. Yuan was not afraid. The purple lightning wings on his back grew to 10 feet long. Then, thunder roared and he disappeared from the spot as if he had teleported. The blood dragon missed its target. Just as it was about to continue its pursuit, Yuan appeared on the blood dragon's head. He held the tiger head clear golden spear in his hand and smashed it down. Boom! The blood dragon roared as it was hit by the tiger head clear golden spear and fell heavily to the ground. 4-kill formation, come out. At the same time, Yuan merged his celestial force and drew out the 4-kill formation. The massacre, annihilation and annihilation formation floated above Zhuo Wen's head. Under Zhuo Wen's control, they were like 4 thick blood-colored walls, firmly trapping the blood dragon, not allowing it to leave at all. Then I'll play with you. Zhuan licked his lips and his fighting spirit soared. The love seal and wrath seal of the 7 emotions treasured seal were used on him. The sorrow seal landed on the blood dragon and weakened its combat power. Boom, boom, boom. Following this, Zhuo Wen's legs sank as he plummeted from the sky. Gusts of powerful astral winds swept past Zhuo Wen's body, causing wild whistling sounds to ring out. When Zhuan arrived in front of the blood dragon roared and swung its tail, smashing heavily on Zhuo Wen's body. However, Zhuan was prepared. He pointed his right hand and the 4-kill formation blocked in front of him. The blood dragon's tail could not do anything to him. At the same time, the tiger head deep golden spear in Zhuo Wen's hand suddenly shot out. The sound of a tiger's roar could be heard as a huge shadow of a ferocious tiger leaped out from the tip of the spear and pounced towards the blood dragon without any hesitation. Bang 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 bang. The ferocious tiger and the blood dragon intertwined with each other. Every strike caused the ground to tremble with a dull feeling. Get up! When the blood dragon and tiger head clear and blood, Yuan came to the blood dragon's tail and hugged the blood dragon's tail head. Head and tiger head studio head clear and tiger head dragon. The blood dragon was caught off guard and howled. However, Zhuo Wen's strength was not to be underestimated. It was still thrown out and slammed heavily on the surface of the 4-kill formation. Waves of strangling force flowed out. Although the blood dragon had rough skin and thick flesh, it was still howling and groaning in pain from this strangling force. When the blood dragon had just gotten rid of the strangulation force, Zhuan came in front of it again. He swung his spear and smashed it heavily on the blood dragon's body. Then, the blood dragon screamed and crashed heavily on the ground again. Boom, boom, boom. In the 4-kill formation, the battle between Zhuan and the blood dragon was almost one-sided. The blood dragon was badly beaten by Zhuan. However, the blood dragon had thick skin. Although it was riddled with wounds, it was not seriously injured. The blood dragon roared and finally stopped targeting Zhuan. Instead, it turned into a bloody light and returned to Zhuan's palm, turning into a blood-red dragon seal. Staring at the dragon seal in his palm, Puan muttered to himself, "This should be a strand of divine consciousness of the great slaughter Saint Dragon. It was unwilling to be controlled by me, so it came out to resist. Let's test the power of this dragon seal." As he spoke, Puan struck out with his right hand. The great slaughter dragon seal was like a ball of fire, spreading out from Zhuan's palm and enveloping Zhuan's entire body in an instant. Then, Zhuan's face, hands, and entire body were stained with red marks. A murderous aura burst out from Zhuan's body. This is the power of the great slaughter dragon seal? Zhuan stared at the red marks on his hands and body in astonishment. He was speechless. This great slaughter dragon seal is too unconventional. With a soft sigh, Zhuan slammed his fist on the ground. He was shocked to find that a wave of air, centered on his fist, swept out in all directions. Then the entire Ao Yuan peak began to tremble violently. In the trembling, there was a faint dragon roar, which was extremely loud and aggressive. My strength has increased by so much? Zhuan's eyes were filled with disbelief. What kind of great power did one need to be able to shake the entire Ao Yuan peak with one punch? Of course, his punch had awakened all the disciples on Ao Yuan peak. Many of them ran out of their rooms, thinking that it was another battle between saints. However, this time, the tremor only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. This made the other disciples on Ao Yuan peak very suspicious and frightened. 4 figures stood at the top of the cliff in front of the wasteland. These 4 figures silently stared at Tun on the wasteland. This little guy is not simple. The power of the move just now was terrifying. It could shake the entire Ao Yuan peak. Xiao Yu clicked his tongue in amazement, looking satisfied. Well, let's not talk about whether this boy can comprehend the void celestial scripture. His strength and talent alone are enough for Ao Yuan peak to nurture, Yan Ji said indifferently. Xiao Yu was stunned. Then he said, "Martial Uncle Yan Ji, didn't you say that you would give more resources to nurture Zhuan? Our Ao Yuan peak's resources are not comparable to the other 8 main peaks. We still have to rely on you, he." Yan Ji's eyes flickered. "Don't worry. I will arrange more resources for Ao Yuan peak while this boy is comprehending the void celestial scripture. I just hope that he won't let me down." Xiao Yu rolled his eyes and said, "In other words, if Zhuan can't comprehend the void celestial scripture in the end, you won't give him more resources?" Wenbai hit Xiao Yu on the head and said, "The inner yard is a fair competition. Ao Yuan peak has become like this under the management of a good-for-nothing like you. What can you do? If Zhuan can't comprehend the void celestial scripture, we won't put too many resources on this little guy." Hearing this, Xiao Yu pulled a long face. However, he also knew that in this world, if one did not have the corresponding ability, he would not be able to enjoy the corresponding resources. If Zhuan could comprehend the void celestial scripture, Yan Ji and the other 2 would naturally be willing to nurture him. If he could not comprehend it, they would not do so. After all, the lineal disciples of the other 8 main peaks in the inner yard were extremely powerful and terrifying. They were not much worse than Zhuan, or even more outstanding. If it were not for the fact that Zhuan could cause the void stone tablet to move, he would not have attracted the attention of Yan Ji and the other 2. This all depends on Zhuan himself. There is no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Jiang Xian also echoed. The 4 of them were far stronger than Zhuan. It was understandable that Zhuan did not notice them. At this moment, Zhuan was shocked by the great power that the Supreme Slaughter Dragon Seal had given him. The 4 of them watched for a while and then left the wasteland. After all, cultivation was Zhuowen's private matter. It was not appropriate for them to pry too much into it. I should find someone to try it. Having said that, Zhuowen took out the demon-sealing green coffin from his spiritual ring and immediately opened it completely. Suddenly, a terrifying blood qi spurted out. The blood qi wriggled and finally formed a huge blood shadow. It was the blood demon. Ever since the blood demon was severely injured by sky insect, he had been holed up in the demon-sealing green coffin. In addition, Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the fourth heaven emperor realm. He was not too worried about the blood demon. The blood demon was stunned. He immediately waved his limbs and stared at Zhuowen in surprise. He said, "You let me out again? You have reached the fourth heaven emperor realm?" The blood demon seemed to have discovered something. He looked at Zhuowen in surprise. When he was in the emperor's tomb, he knew that Zhuowen had not reached the emperor realm. Later on, he was severely injured by sky insect. He used the blood escape and re-entered the demon-sealing green coffin to recuperate. He did not pay attention to the situation outside. Now that he was released again, how could he not be surprised to see that Zhuowen had reached the fourth heaven emperor realm? Zhuowen clenched his fist and chuckled. "Blood demon, how about we exchange blows?" "What did you say?" The blood demon was stunned. He looked at Zhuowen as if he was looking at an idiot. This brat actually said that he wanted to exchange blows with him? Was he joking? Although the blood demon was severely injured because of sky insect, his strength was still comparable to an ordinary seventh heaven emperor realm. Zhuowen was only a fourth heaven emperor realm. How dare he say that he wanted to exchange blows with him? Wasn't he courting death? Remember what you said. If I accidentally kill you, don't blame me. The blood demon laughed in a strange manner. Soon after, he took a step forward. A huge fan-like blood palm pressed down from the sky with the intention of crushing Zhuowen's entire body into dust. Zhuowen grinned and his eyes were filled with excitement. Immediately, the Tai-killing dragon seal appeared in his right palm. His body was covered with blood-red seals and a terrifying aura of Tai-killing surged. Then, Zhuowen gently stretched out his right hand. Blood qi surrounded his palm and he struck out. His small palm was a stark contrast to the blood demon's huge palm. Boom! There was a thunderous sound. Then, the blood demon's smile gradually disappeared. He realized that his right palm had frozen the moment it came into contact with Zhuowen's right palm. A mighty force came from his palm and spread throughout his right arm. Then, he involuntarily retreated and sat on the ground. Bang! 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 A dull tremor came from the ground. The blood demon stared blankly at the small figure in front of him, who was as immovable as a mountain. This brat! How can his strength be so terrifying? The blood demon muttered to himself. Blood demon, where are you looking? Again. Chapter 1352. Comprehending the Void Stone Tablet. Boom. 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 The blood demon was stunned. This was a one-sided battle. Under Zhuowen's mighty power, he had no power to resist at all. On the wasteland, the howls turned into screams, and finally, the screams turned into begging for mercy. Zhuowen clapped his hands and looked at the weak blood demon. He smiled and said, "This sparring partner is not bad. Also, you are free now. I have fulfilled my promise to you. I will not imprison you again." The blood demon was powerless. In his heart, he felt a deep sense of fear toward Zhuowen. Was this still the same young man who had trembled under his might? Back then, at the top of the Yuanqi Tower, even his shadow could pinch Zhuowen to death with a finger. But now, after a few years, his real body could not resist at all in the hands of the young man from back then. "You are not going to imprison me?" When he heard Zhuowen's words, the blood demon was stunned. Soon after, his gaze became extremely complicated. "What? Do you still want to be imprisoned in the demon-sealing green coffin?" Zhuowen turned his head and said jokingly, "No." The blood demon shook his head. Then he looked around and said, "Where is this?" "The Divine Nether Realm, one of the 9 Nether Realms. Jiashan Academy's inner courtyard," Zhuowen said indifferently. The blood demon nodded. Soon after, his huge body gradually shrank. In the end, he turned into a young man with blood-red hair and eyes. He wore a blood-red robe and looked exceptionally demonic. I am not from the divine nether realm. You need to take me out, the blood demon said in a deep voice. Looking at the blood demon who had transformed into a human, Un was stunned at first. Then he nodded and said, "Come with me. I will take you out of the inner courtyard. At that time, I will give you a map. You can follow the map and leave the divine nether realm." After saying that, Juan took out a jade slip and handed it to the blood demon. Then he led the latter out of mysterious origin peak. Outside the mountain gate of the inner courtyard, Juan stared at blood demon and said, "You can live in the divine specter realm, or you can leave the divine specter realm. It's all up to you." After saying that, Juan simply entered the sect. He didn't say anything more to the blood demon. From now on, he would have nothing to do with the blood demon. The blood demon had a complicated expression as he looked at Juan, who had returned to the inner courtyard. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said, 10,000 years ago, he was injured by the head of the Ryuka family. 10,000 years later, he was actually released by a Ryuka descendant. I really don't know if this is an ill-fated relationship. It's time for me to make a trip back to the Central Plains. I haven't been back for 10,000 years. I wonder if the blood refining residence is still around. If it's still there, those old guys in the blood refining mansion should be able to help me recover. With that, the blood demon took a step forward and turned into an illusory blood-red shadow, disappearing from the place. Juan spent a few days consolidating his cultivation. Then, he walked out of his room and headed to the Void Stone Tablet in the central area of Mysterious Origin Peak. Yanji, Jiangxian, and Wenbai were still sitting cross-legged around the Void Stone Tablet. As long as the three elders had time, they would usually stay at Mysterious Origin Peak to comprehend the Void Immortal Scripture in the Void Stone Tablet. "Juan, you're here." Yanji and the other two elders also saw Juan walking over and revealed a smile on their faces. "Greetings to the three martial uncles." Juan bowed respectfully. These three old guys were all saints. Juan didn't dare to be rude. Looking at Juan's respectful appearance, Yanji and the other two were satisfied and nodded repeatedly. "Juan, come here. This Void Stone Tablet contains the Void Immortal Scripture. If you want to comprehend the Void Immortal Scripture, you only need to put your mind into the Void Stone Tablet. The principle is similar to the Immortal Path technique that you comprehend." Wenbai walked forward and enthusiastically pulled Juan to an open space near the Void Stone Tablet. After sitting down, Juan's attention was on the Void Stone Tablet. Only half of the Void Stone Tablet was exposed outside, while the other half was hidden in the illusory space. It was quite strange. "Juan, don't have any distracting thoughts in your mind. Put your mind into the surface of the Void Stone Tablet. Then, the Void Stone Tablet will guide your mind into a space where you will see the real Void Immortal Scripture." Yanji's loud voice rang out, causing Juan's gaze to become serious. Afterwards, his mind extended into the Void Stone Tablet like a tentacle. The moment his mind touched the Void Stone Tablet, a powerful suction force sucked in Juan's mind. Afterwards, Juan felt his vision darken. When he opened his eyes, he discovered that he was in a boundless void. Juan discovered a tall figure standing in the void. This figure had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He had sword-like eyebrows and bright eyes. He was handsome. However, what surprised Juan was that the middle-aged man's aura was illusory. It was extremely strange. The moment the middle-aged man appeared in the void, Juan discovered that his surroundings had begun to change. It had become a boundless land. Smoke filled the air as the flames of war blazed on the land. The land and sky were both black. The only source of light was the lightning that constantly wreaked havoc in the sky. It was densely packed and emitted a dim blue light. Through the faint lightning, Juan could sense that there was a huge exotic beast several 100,000 feet long on the land below the lightning. It was walking over step by step. The exotic beast was like a human. It stood on two legs and its entire body was black. Its limbs were covered in sharp claws. Its thick muscles were curvy and gave off a powerful feeling. Furthermore, the exotic beast had two heads. One was a tiger's head, while the other was a wolf's head. It held a bone weapon that was several 100,000 feet long in its hands. Every step it took caused the land to shake violently, as if the end of the world had arrived. Below this huge beast, countless other exotic beasts were swarming over. These exotic beasts were much smaller than this huge beast, but their numbers were enough to make one's scalp go numb. Is he going to deal with all these exotic beasts by himself? Zhuan stared at all of this quietly. Even he was moved by the formation formed by the countless exotic beasts. As a result, a sliver of worry rose in his heart when he saw the unmoving middle-aged man standing at the front. The huge beast arrived first. It roared and clenched its right hand. The huge bone weapon in its hand whistled out, creating a violent gust of wind as it smashed towards the middle-aged man. Boom, boom, boom. As the bone weapon swept through the surrounding space, the wind howled wildly. A terrifying storm swept up in a radius of several thousand feet. How terrifying! Zhuan's eyes narrowed when he saw the terrifying attack from the exotic beast. His heart skipped a beat. The exotic beast's attack had completely surpassed the range of the Emperor realm. Zhuan knew very well that he would die without a doubt if he faced this attack. Coupled with the countless exotic beasts that were ready to attack, this was a fatal situation. However, the middle-aged man's expression was extremely calm. He took a step forward and directly escaped into the void, causing the huge exotic beast to miss its target. Just when the exotic beast wanted to turn around and search for the middle-aged man, it immediately discovered that an extremely powerful restrictive force had appeared around it. Afterwards, the space where the exotic beast stood shattered. The sound of glass shattering rang out, forming a vacuum in the area. Turn into nothingness with the void. An indifferent voice rang out. Following this, the huge exotic beast shattered like glass and vanished. So powerful! Zhuan's heart trembled. Although he did not know the exact strength of the exotic beast, the attack from before had left a deep impression on him. The exotic beast was definitely an existence that had surpassed the Emperor realm. However, it had been instantly killed by a single attack from the middle-aged man. Wasn't this middle-aged man a little too terrifying? The death of the huge exotic beast did not scare away the countless exotic beasts below. Furious roars rang out one after another, and the exotic beasts all leapt up and shot towards the middle-aged man in an attempt to kill him. The middle-aged man was expressionless as the power of laws revolved around him. Following this, Zhuan was stunned to discover that the man's right knee was facing the ground, and he suddenly dropped down like 1,000 kilograms. The sound of the air being torn apart rang out. Boom! Just like that, the middle-aged man crashed into the countless beasts as if he didn't care about his life. Soon after, there was an earth-shattering sound. At that moment, time seemed to have stopped. With the middle-aged man as the center, the entire space froze. Afterwards, Zhuan discovered that the space around him had begun to shatter. Not only that, but when he looked over, he saw that the entire space had shattered. A terrifying pressure was transmitted from the shattered space. Subsequently, Zhuan was stunned to discover that the countless exotic beasts around the middle-aged man had completely disappeared like dust. It was as if they had never appeared. The man patted his body and slowly walked towards the endless thunderbolts in front of him. The Law of the Void? Is this the true power of the Law of the Void? Looking at the scene before him, Zhuan fell into a daze, unable to speak for a long time. He finally understood why Yuan Zhi's strength had become so terrifying after comprehending the Void Immortal Scripture. It was mainly because the Law of the Void was too abnormal. Zhuan had seen Saint Rune laws before. For example, Xianzhong's Law of Mysterious Underworld, Xiao Yu's Law of Fire, Yanji's Law of Light, and the Blue Dragon Hall Master Sapphire Shore's Law of Lightning. However, compared to the Law of the Void, there was a certain gap between these four laws. It was no wonder that the Law of the Void was ranked among the top laws, and its power was so terrifying. Thinking of this, Zhuan's eyes were filled with passion. He had a hunch that if he could comprehend the Law of the Void, although his strength might not be comparable to an invincible Emperor Lord, his ability to escape would definitely be top-notch. Moreover, as his cultivation level continued to increase, the power of the law would also become stronger. Chapter 1353. Intertwined. A sliver of bitterness appeared on the corner of Zhuowen's mouth when he thought of Yanji's words. Just how much of a genius was Yuanji back then? But he had actually spent over a decade. He probably would not be any slower. The scene has changed? Just as he was thinking, Yuan suddenly discovered that the scene before him had changed. Afterwards, he discovered that the middle-aged man from before had appeared again, and countless beasts had appeared in front of him. In other words, the scene just now was being replayed. There's no void immortal scripture here? There's only this one scene? Zhuan frowned as he muttered to himself in surprise. Yuan, you've guessed correctly. The void immortal scripture is not a cultivation method, but a scene before you. The middle-aged man in the scene is a saint who has grasped the laws of the void. Suddenly, an indifferent voice rang out from behind Zhuan. Afterwards, Yuan was surprised to discover that Yanji, Jiangxian and Wenbai had entered this space at some unknown time. Yanji walked over to Zhuowen's side and smiled. If you've grasped the laws of the void, you've successfully cultivated the void immortal scripture. Back then, Yuanji comprehended the laws of the void from this scene. When he became a saint, even Sapphire Shore was unable to do anything to him. However, the three of us have watched these scenes over and over again in the past few hundred years. Although we've gained something, we've been unable to comprehend the laws of the void. The laws of the void are just too difficult. Zhuan gradually calmed down. From Yanji's words, he knew that the most precious thing about the tablet was the scene within. Yuan, how do you feel after seeing this scene? Yanji suddenly asked Zhuan. Zhuan sucked in a deep breath and said with a deep voice, I can only say that it's terrifying and powerful. That's only natural. The laws of the void cannot be compared to the laws of the 5 elements and the elemental laws. Once you grasp the laws of the void, you will be able to control the entire void. Of course, the size of this range will depend on the depth of your comprehension. Yanji laughed. Zhuan, you can come here often to study. I believe that the void stone tablet won't do anything for no reason. Since it's doing something, I'm afraid it's fated with you. Perhaps you can become the second Yuanji, Wenbai agreed. Martial granduncles, you think too highly of me. I, Zhuan, will do my best. Zhuan smiled bitterly. The 4 of them exchanged a few more words before the Yanji trio withdrew. Only Zhuan was left to watch the continuously repeating scene. Time passed by slowly. When the sun had set, Zhuan slowly opened his eyes, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. In Zhuowen's opinion, comprehending the laws of the void with just one scene was indeed a difficult task. Naturally, Yanji's team of 3 did not say anything. Comprehending the void laws was not a simple task. Even Yuanji had spent over a decade to do so. Zhuowen's team of 3 was most likely not any less than that. Thus, Yanji's team of 3 was in no rush. In the following period of time, apart from comprehending the laws of the void on Ao Yuan Peak, Yuan refined low-grade immortal pills in his residence. There were many immortal pill recipes in the Fushi Cauldron. Zhuan was smart this time. He refined the Undying Star Pill to replenish the star power in the Imperial Power Realm cultivators and the Snow Lotus Lustrous Jade Pill to heal injuries. Both of these were medium-grade immortal pills. Before Zhuan refined these 2 immortal pills, he had refined his immortal power to the medium-grade immortal power. Naturally, he could refine medium-grade immortal pills. Now, because of Zhuan, the 3 elders had poured a lot of resources from the inner court into Ao Yuan Peak. Moreover, Zhuan's requests were met without fail. Therefore, it was not difficult for Zhuan to gather the ingredients for the immortal pills. 3 months passed slowly. During this time, apart from comprehending the void immortal scripture, Yuan expelled the cold poison from Mu Qinshue's body from time to time. After a long period of expulsion, the cold poison in Mu Qinshue's body decreased and her face became redder. In the dark room, Mu Qinshue was gently nestled in Zhuowen's embrace. She raised her beautiful eyes and stared at the young man's chiseled face. Her willowy eyebrows arched into crescents. Today, the cold poison in Mu Qinshue's body was finally completely expelled by Zhuan. Zhuan even tore out a trace of the dark cold poison's origin and stored it in the Saint Rune of Ice. Jun, you don't look like a scholar who is well read. I can't believe you have so many strange stories in your head. After so many days, among all the stories you have told me, my favorite is still the love story between Wu Sangue and Chen Yuanyuan. Zhuan gently stroked the beautiful woman in his arms and smiled softly. Why do you only like this story? The process of expelling the cold poison was extremely painful. Mu Chenxue not only had to endure the corrosion and backlash of the cold poison in her body, but she also had to endure the burning of the heavenly fire that poured into her body. The combination of cold and heat made her feel as if thousands of ants were gnawing at her heart. However, Mu Chenxue resisted the pain and did not make a sound. She was afraid that she would disturb Zhuowen as he was expelling the poison from her body. Every time he saw Mu Chenxue's painful expression, Zhuowen's heart would clench tightly. In order to distract her and lessen the pain caused by expelling the cold poison, Yun told her many interesting stories from Earth during the expelling process. Because Zhuowen had cultivated the myriad evolution scripture, his mental strength was extremely powerful. It was not a problem for him to multitask at all. Moreover, his efficiency would not decrease. Therefore, he was not affected too much when he was telling stories while expelling the poison. Mu Chenxue also listened with great interest. She was even fascinated by the stories. Every time Zhuowen came to expelling the poison, she would always ask Zhuowen to tell her stories. After all, Zhuowen came from Earth. In the era of information explosion, the information he came into contact with was definitely far more than the heavenly armor continent, which had no technological civilization at all. In addition, Zhuowen's mental strength and memory were much stronger than ordinary people because of his cultivation. He could remember books or things that he might have only glanced at once in his previous life. Therefore, Mu Chenxue was immediately fascinated by Zhuowen's strange stories. She would even ask Zhuowen to stay for a long time before letting Zhuowen go back. Hearing Zhuowen's question, Mu Chenxue's beautiful eyes darted around. She smiled and said, because Wu Sangue is willing to fight for Chen Yuanyuan. He is willing to lead his army and overthrow the dynasty. I am also willing to overthrow all obstacles for you. Zhuowen also smiled and replied. Really? Mu Chenxue's delicate body trembled. She looked deeply at Zhuowen and muttered. Really? Zhuowen stared at that pair of bright eyes and replied extremely seriously. Mu Chenxue smiled. She smiled very happily, like a child who had received her favorite toy. Her smile was like 100 flowers blooming, extremely resplendent. Zhuowen was stunned. Mu Chenxue noticed Zhuowen's current state and smiled foolishly. Her cheeks suddenly turned red as she asked softly, Am I beautiful? Beautiful, Zhuowen replied without hesitation. Then, the two of them fell into a long silence. They could only hear each other's breathing and heartbeat. In the dark room, their eyes emitted traces of light, like the stars in the night sky. Their eyes met, and the two of them quietly stared at each other. In the end, Zhuowen slowly leaned over and fiercely kissed the beauty's lips. Traces of charm and gentleness filled the gloomy room. In this long night, the two figures were entwined with each other. The next morning, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. In his arms, there was a warm figure. Zhuowen quietly stared at the beauty in his arms. At this moment, the beauty was still sleeping. Her light breathing slowly sounded out, like a kitten, exceptionally cute, causing Zhuowen to want to take a bite. Zhuowen hugged the beauty and quietly laid on the bed. Thinking back to yesterday's scene, he only felt that it was like the next day, and he had also turned Mu Chenxue into a woman that belonged to him. At this moment, Zhuowen suddenly felt a squirming sensation in his arms. Bending down, he saw Mu Chenxue staring at him with her big, bright eyes. She was all smiles as she stared at Zhuowen with a faint smile on her lips. You're awake. Zhuowen gently hugged the woman in his arms. The corner of his mouth was full of smiles. Mu Chenxue gently nodded. Her delicate head gently leaned on Zhuowen's chest, as if listening to the latter's heartbeat. She murmured, We will be together forever, right? We will never be separated. Zhuan stroked Mu Qinshue's smooth back and seriously nodded, saying, "We will always be together, and will never be separated. I know you are the saintess of the Burning Heaven sect, and I also know how powerful the force behind you is. However, I will still marry you officially, but you have to give me some time. I will make the Burning Heaven sect completely recognize me." Mu Qinshu gently leaned on Zhuowen's chest. Suddenly, she fell silent and didn't answer. Zhuan didn't have any doubts. He was now looking forward to how to develop Ryuka in the future, or how to increase his own strength. When the time comes, he will be able to openly go to the Burning Heaven sect and propose marriage. This way, he can avoid the tragedy of his parents. Moreover, if he and his forces are strong enough, he will be able to reunite his father and mother. When the time comes, his family will be able to live in harmony. I believe you will be able to do it. Mu Qinshu suddenly raised her head. Her cherry-red lips gently touched Zhuowen's lips, and an extremely brilliant smile hung on her charming face. After leaving the floating snow pavilion, Yuan came to the heart of the 9 peaks. Today was the day of the core disciple selection. In the heart of the 9 peaks, there was a row of arenas. Their figures were crisscrossing with each other, constantly exchanging blows. Chapter 1354. Core disciple selection. During these 3 months, he naturally gave some immortal elixirs to Moyan, Wushang, and the other 4. With the help of the immortal elixirs, the progress of the 5 could be said to be lightning fast. Each of them advanced by leaps and bounds. Among them, Moyan Wushang, Qin Yin, Mo Lingtian, and Jianan had all broken through to the 3rd level of the Emperor Realm. As for Gatha, she had broken through to the 4th level of the Emperor Realm. Moreover, Gatha's Heaven's Wrath Armor Soul was discovered by the Great Void Peak's Peak Master, the Great Void Taoist. He had directly accepted Gatha as a direct disciple of the Great Void Peak. Because of this, many disciples in the 9 peaks were envious of Gatha. Moyan Wushang, Qin Yin, Mo Lingtian, and Jianan must have just entered the inner sect. They are all 3rd level of the Emperor Realm. Their strength is so strong. It won't be a problem for them to become a core disciple. I remember that the 4 of them were only 1st level of the Emperor Realm 3 months ago. How did their cultivation improve so quickly in such a short period of time? It's unbelievable. Among the crowd, Zhuowen heard many discussions. The main characters of these discussions were naturally Moyan Wushang and the other 3. At the center of the 9 peaks, there were 4 figures in the 4 arenas. Zhuowen was very familiar with them. They were Moyan Wushang, Qin Yin, Jianan, and Mo Lingtian. The rules of the core disciple selection were very simple. Whoever could accept the challenges of others in the arena and persist until the end would be qualified to become a core disciple. The host of this selection was no stranger to Zhun. It was the administrator of the 9 peaks, Zhang Shui. Although Zhang Shui looked ordinary, her cultivation was not weak. She was a 6th level Emperor Realm existence. She was more than qualified to host the selection of official and registered disciples. During this period, Yuan also saw some disciples showing signs of taking advantage of the situation. They were all directly pulled out by Zhang Shui and violently beaten up. She did not show the slightest bit of mercy. Therefore, from time to time, there would be wails of ghosts and howls of wolves echoing from the surroundings of the arena. It was precisely because of this action of punishing the chicken to warn the monkey that the other disciples naturally did not dare to fish in troubled waters. Instead, they obediently carried out the selection competition according to the process. This kind of core disciple selection didn't last long before it came to an end. There were a total of 9 people who advanced to the ranks of core disciples. 4 of them were naturally Moyan Wushang, Jianan, Mo Lingtian, and Qin Yin. The other 5 people were the 5 strongest among the official disciples back then. One of them was Zhou Liang, who had provoked Zhuowen because he was unhappy with Zhuowen pulling Mu Qinshu. Ever since Zhou Liang had been defeated by Zhuowen in one move, he had become a lot more well-behaved and low-key. He did not dare to act in a high-profile manner. Big brother Zhuowen. After walking down the arena, Jianan's sharp eyes saw Zhuowen in the crowd with a smile. He shouted loudly and ran toward Zhuowen. As soon as the words came out, it immediately attracted the attention of many disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks. Immediately, their gazes fell on Zhuan. So he's Zhuan. I heard that the battle of the Divine Nether Realm Saints 3 months ago was related to this guy. Yes, our 3 great-granduncles of the inner sect, who are saints, actually came out for this guy. I wonder what is the relationship between this guy and the 3 great-granduncles? We can't afford to offend this guy. After all, he's the existence that killed the 7th Azure Dragon envoy. That's an 8th-level Emperor Realm existence. The other disciples standing around Zhuan consciously stepped aside and stayed far away from Zhuan. Moreover, they whispered to the people around them. Their gazes were extremely cautious and fearful. As for Zhou Liang, who was standing on the arena not far away, his expression froze. He looked at Zhuan as if he had seen a ghost. After regaining his senses, he was like a mouse that had seen a cat. He hurriedly left the arena, causing Zhang Shui to be puzzled. I knew that Big Brother Zhuan would come to see us. Big Brother Zhuan, was my performance very impressive just now? Jianan clenched his fist and smiled excitedly. Indeed very impressive. Zhuan patted Jianan's head and smiled. This caused Jianan to become even more excited. It's all thanks to Brother Zhua's contribution. If it weren't for the Lunar Pure Yang Elixir and the 9-marked Green Spiritual Elixir, we wouldn't have advanced so quickly. It wouldn't have been so easy for us to become a core disciple. Mo Lingtian walked over and gently patted Zhuowen's shoulder. His eyes were filled with gratitude. He was very clear about his own talent. It was impossible for him to reach the 3rd-level Emperor realm in such a short time. All the credit was due to the elixir that Zhuowen had given him. Of course I know that. In my eyes, Big Brother Zhua is omnipotent. Jianan clenched his fist and smiled. Thank you very much. Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin also came in front of Zhuan and expressed their gratitude. Zhuan waved his hand and smiled. We all came from the outer courtyard together. Moreover, we are all friends. It's natural for me to help you. You don't have to be so polite. The 4 of them nodded. Then, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes flickered and said, how is your life in Ao Yuan Peak? It's pretty good. Zhuan smiled and asked, which peak do you want to go to? Since you've become a core disciple, you have the right to choose. I want to go to the Divine Devil Peak. It's said that the Divine Devil Peak cultivates the body. It's very suitable for me. Jianan couldn't wait to answer. The Divine Devil Peak is very suitable for you. Zhuan nodded. Jianan's immortal armor soul meant that he was destined to use his fists to solve problems. He wouldn't use his brain to solve problems. Even if he needed to use his brain, he would still use his fists to solve the problem. Moreover, the strongest technique of the Divine Devil Peak, the 9 transformations of the Divine Devil, was an extremely powerful body refining technique. It was much more advanced than the Nirvana Vairocana that Zhuowen's Buddhist avatar had cultivated. If Jianan could cultivate such a powerful body refining technique, coupled with the characteristics of his immortal armor soul, he would definitely become a terrifying humanoid fighting machine in the future. Moreover, he would be a very brainless one. After that, Zhuowen's eyes fell on Mo Lingtian, Moyan Wushang and Qingyin. I plan to join the Hidden Sword Peak. My life emperor weapon is a long sword. The Heaven Burial Sword scripture is also suitable for me. Mo Lingtian replied with a smile. I'll join the Tai Xian Peak. The strongest technique of the Tai Xian Peak, the 6-layered zither scripture, is a technique about music. Qingyin also replied. Finally, Zhuowen's eyes fell on Moyan Wushang and said, Wushang, your armor soul is also related to music. You should also join the Tai Xian Peak, right? However, Moyan Wushang shook his head and said firmly, I want to join the Mysterious Origin Peak. As soon as he said this, Yuan frowned and said, You're not suitable for the Mysterious Origin Peak. All the techniques of the Mysterious Origin Peak require the activation of immortal power. You don't cultivate mental power, so you can't condense immortal power at all. Joining the Mysterious Origin Peak will only delay your future. Moyan Wushang shook his head and said stubbornly, I want to join the Mysterious Origin Peak. Jianan, Mo Lingtian and Qingyin looked at each other and remained silent. They naturally knew the reason why Moyan Wushang wanted to join the mysterious origin peak. Zhuowen's face became a little serious, and his voice gradually became cold. He said, "No, the mysterious origin peak is not suitable for you. I'm the pro-disciple of the mysterious origin peak. Even if you choose the mysterious origin peak in the end, I will eliminate you. Don't waste your time." Hearing this, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes gradually became misty, and there was a trace of a pitiful look on his face. However, Nguyen acted as if he didn't hear it, and his eyes were extremely cold. The mysterious origin peak was not a good place for ordinary disciples. Not to mention the void celestial scripture, which was extremely difficult to comprehend. Even the ordinary techniques in the mysterious origin peak required the activation of immortal power. Therefore, Zhuan would never agree to let Moyan Wushang join the mysterious origin peak. Moyan Wushang stared at Zhuan. Finally, he wiped the corners of his eyes and said calmly, "Then I choose the Tai Xian peak, together with Qingyin." Looking at Moyan Wushang's appearance, Zhuan sighed in his heart. How could he not know Moyan Wushang's feelings for him? However, his heart was full of Mu Chenshua. How could he have other thoughts to pay attention to Moyan Wushang's feelings? This was destined to be an ill-fated relationship between the falling flowers and the heartless brook. Zhuan waved his right hand and took out 5 porcelain bottles. He said, "These are the immortal star pills, which are very beneficial for your cultivation. After entering the mysterious origin peak, you should cultivate well and strive to improve your cultivation so that you can get better resources. And Jianan, I'll give Gatha's share to you. You can give it to Gatha when the time comes." Jianan took the 2 porcelain bottles and nodded seriously. He said, "Thank you, Brother Zhua. I will personally give it to Gatha." After that, Zhuan chatted with the 4 for a while and then left the heart of the 9 peaks. Zhuan had faintly sensed that there were signs of a breakthrough. Perhaps after some time, he would be able to break through to the 5th-level Emperor realm. Looking at Zhuowen's back, Moyan Wushang's mood was quite low. Qingyin gently patted Moyan Wushang's shoulder and said, "Wushang, aren't you too stubborn? Some things can't be forced." Moyan Wushang raised his head and revealed a brilliant smile. He said, "I know. Let's go to the Tai Xian peak first. Now, I just want to be stronger." Qingyin nodded when she saw that Moyan Wushang had thought it through. However, Moyan Wushang didn't finish his words. He still had half of his words in his heart. "When I'm strong enough, I will be able to help Zhuowen." After returning to the mysterious origin peak, Lu Qing came to find him. "Senior Lu Qing, what's the matter?" Zhuowen looked at Lu Qing and asked. Chapter 1355. Immortal Star Pill? Oh? The violent energy of the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace will weaken to its weakest half a year later? Zhuowen asked in surprise. He naturally knew about the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. The energy around the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace was very violent. Usually, even high-level emperors could not get close to it. Only experts like the peak masters of the 9 peaks could get close. Moreover, it was very difficult for them to stay in the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace for too long. Fortunately, the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace followed a certain pattern. Every once in a while, the violent energy on the surface would weaken significantly. That was the best time for the disciples of the 9 peaks to enter the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. It was said that every time a cultivator entered the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace, their cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. It could be said that the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace was a sacred cultivation ground in the hearts of many disciples of the inner court. At the same time, every time the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace weakened, it was the best time for the disciples to make a great leap. The violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace will only weaken once every 10 years. You're quite lucky. Not long after you entered the inner court, you coincidentally encountered the moment when the violent energy of the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace weakened, Lu Qing said with a smile. Ever since Lu Qing found out about what had happened at Sky Capital Peak 3 months ago, her attitude toward Zhuowen had also changed. Her attitude was not one of adoration, but of admiration. Moreover, Ao Yuanfeng had been silent for too long. In addition, Xiao Yu had privately told her that Zhuowen was the most promising candidate to comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra in Ao Yuanfeng. Naturally, she had a whole new level of respect for Zhuowen. Thank you for your reminder, senior sister Lu Qing. I will definitely enter the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace with you in half a year, Zhuowen said with a smile. Oh, by the way, the 9 Serenity Conference is about to begin. You should pay attention when the time comes, Lu Qing suddenly reminded him. 9 Serenity Conference? Zhuowen was startled. He asked with a strange expression. He had never heard of this so-called 9 Nether Convention before. Perhaps it was because he saw the surprise in Zhuowen's eyes, but Lu Qing was also startled, and then he said, Master didn't tell you about this before? At the mention of Xiao Yu, Zhuowen's face turned a little ugly. After Xiao Yu returned to Mysterious Origin Peak 3 months ago, he went straight to his wooden house to study something. Once again, he completely forgot about him, his direct disciple, let alone the 9 Nether Conference. Looks like Master didn't tell you about this. Lu Qing sighed softly and continued. The so-called 9 Nether Assembly is actually a grand event jointly created by the 9 Nether Realms. It seems to involve the quota to go to the Central Plains. The quota to head to the Central Plains? You need a quota to head to the Central Plains? Can't we go by ourselves? Zhuowen's interest was immediately piqued when he heard about the Central Plains. Previously, when he was in the Emperor's tomb, he had heard about the Central Plains from the Baifeng. It was said that the forces in the Central Plains were generally much stronger than the Eastern Land's 9 Nether Realm. According to the Baifeng, the Central Plains was the core region of the entire Heavenly Armor continent. The real experts also existed in the Eastern Lands. However, Lu Qing shook his head and said, the Central Plains is extremely far from the Eastern Lands. Even a saint would need a long time to reach the Central Plains by relying on his own strength. As for those below the Saint Realm, it would take an extremely long time to reach the Central Plains. Perhaps even when your lifespan is nearing its end, you might not be able to fly to the Central Plains. Zhuowen said in surprise, it's actually so far away? An Emperor Realm expert might not be able to fly to the Central Plains in his lifetime? Then how do ordinary people go to the Central Plains? Lu Qing explained, there is an ancient formation in the 9 Nether Realm. That ancient formation leads directly to the Central Plains. However, it can only transport 9 people at a time. Moreover, it can only be activated once every few hundred years. The 9 Nether Assembly is actually a competition for the geniuses of the 9 Nether Realms to compete for the quota to enter this ancient formation. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He had a preliminary understanding of the details of the 9 Nether Assembly. The Central Plains. Perhaps I really need to go there and take a look, Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Soon after, he smiled at Lu Qing and said, Thank you for your reminder, senior sister. May I know when the 9 Nether Assembly will begin? Lu Qing's beautiful eyes flickered. She smiled and said, There are still 5 years. The 9 Nether Assembly is a grand event for the top geniuses of the 9 Nether Realms. It will undoubtedly be extremely difficult to obtain those 9 quotas. If junior brother Zhuowen is interested, it would be best for you to raise your cultivation in these 5 years. Perhaps you might be able to enter the top 9. Zhuowen revealed a thoughtful expression when he heard these words. Hee, senior sister still has matters to attend to, so I will take my leave first. I am looking forward to entering the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace with you. Let's meet again in half a year. Lu Qing revealed a charming smile. Soon after, she waved her hand and left Zhuowen's bamboo house. At night, Zhuowen sat cross-legged on a praying mat. His eyes were filled with determination. He was very clear that he was still not strong enough. He needed to become even stronger. I still have a dozen undying star pills on me. I wonder if my cultivation will be able to make a breakthrough after consuming all of them? As he spoke, Nguyen took out a porcelain bottle from his sleeve. Soon after, he opened the bottle cork. Immediately, a rich medicinal fragrance spread out, lingering in the surroundings and refreshing the mind. I hope that I can make a breakthrough during this period of time. His eyes flickered. Zhuan took out a pill and stuffed it into his mouth. A surge of medicinal power spread out, filling his entire body. A warm current flowed through the meridians in his body and continuously circulated, causing Zhuan's spirit to tremble and feel refreshed. Zhuan stayed in the bamboo house for 2 months. He did not take a single step out of the house. During these 2 months, Du Shan did not even dare to approach his residence. Instead, he lay on a stone table in a remote area outside the courtyard. This was because 2 months ago, when Zhuan went into seclusion in the bamboo house, a vast pressure spread out from the bamboo house. Because Du Shan lived next to Zhuan, he was the first to be affected. At that time, Du Shan was sleeping. When the pressure spread over, his bed was crushed into powder, and he fell flat on his face. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. Sigh. Why is it Zhuan again? I shouldn't have stayed with this fellow in the first place. Du Shan rubbed his hands and looked at the bamboo house in front of him with a face full of resentment. His door was still open, but he didn't dare to enter. The pressure inside was too terrifying. The moment he entered, he felt his heart skip a beat. Boom boom boom. Just as Du Shan was sighing, a muffled sound came from the bamboo house. Soon after, Du Shan was stunned to discover that the bamboo house in front of him had begun to collapse. An aura as vast as the ocean spread out from the ruined bamboo house. What followed was a violent trembling sound. Dust filled the air. Du Shan was vaguely able to see a blurry figure amidst the dust. This figure slowly walked over. Clear footsteps continuously reverberated across the area. When this figure arrived in front of Du Shan discovered that it was a rather cold-faced young man. At this moment, the young man's eyebrows were slightly furrowed as he looked at the ruins behind him in confusion. Zhuan, you've broken through again? Du Shan stared at Zhuan, his little heart continuously beating. After suppressing it for a long time, he screamed out as if he had seen a ghost. Zhuan frowned slightly. He clenched his fists and felt the surging star power in his body. The corners of his mouth curled up and he laughed towards the sky. I really didn't expect to break through in 2 months. I thought it would take half a year. Zhuan's eyes were filled with excitement. During these 2 months, Zhuan had continuously taken Undying Star pills. The Undying Star pill was a middle-grade immortal pill. Its medicinal effect was extremely powerful. If a cultivator who was not strong enough took one Undying Star pill and did not pay attention, it was very likely that they would explode from the powerful medicinal effect. However, Zhuan was extremely crazy. After taking more than a dozen pills in succession, the surging medicinal effect was like a vast ocean, filling all the meridians in Zhuan's body. This process could be said to be quite painful, but Zhuan forcibly endured it. Moreover, it was precisely because of the dozen Undying Star pills that Zhuan was able to emit such a terrifying pressure. Even Du Shan did not dare to stay in the bamboo hut. For 2 months, he had been forced to sleep outside the bamboo hut. It had been quite miserable. Du Shan rolled his eyes. He really did not have the energy to complain. Ever since he lived under the same roof as Zhuan, his worldview had been shattered into pieces by Zhuan. Because the speed at which Zhuan broke through had already caused Du Shan to be taken aback. He was truly unable to imagine exactly how Zhuan cultivated and why his cultivation advanced so quickly. However, Zhuan himself did not find it strange. After all, he had the pill recipe from the Fushi Cauldron and was able to create a middle-grade immortal pill like the Undying Star pill. Mid-grade immortal pills were most effective for mid-level great emperors. Zhuan had consumed the Undying Star pill like it was water. If he couldn't break through, then there would be a problem. However, because Zhuan's immortal energy was only at the middle grade, he could only create middle-grade immortal pills at most. If he had a high-grade immortal pill, the effects would be even better. After all, high-grade immortal pills corresponded to high-grade great emperors and their medicinal effects were extremely dense. However, the ingredients for high-grade immortal pills were extremely precious. Even in the inner courtyard, the main ingredients for high-grade immortal pills in the Fushi Cauldron were scarce, let alone refining them. For Zhuan, high-grade immortal pills were still too far away. Kid, You forcefully used the Undying Star Pill to raise your cultivation base to the 5th grade Great Emperor realm in such a short time. I'm afraid your body has developed a certain resistance to the Undying Star Pill. If you use it again in the future, its medicinal effects will be greatly reduced. Chapter 1356. Fire Beacon, Drug Resistance? Zhuowen muttered. Looks like I need to refine other immortal pills to replace the Undying Star Pill. That's a good idea. You can talk to Qing Huang about it. That guy has all the pill formulas in the Fushi Cauldron, Xiao He said calmly. Zhuowen nodded and looked at Du Shan, who was in a daze. He asked curiously, Brother Du Shan, what's wrong with you? Du Shan came back to his senses and shook his head. He laughed dryly and said, Nothing. Nothing. Congratulations, Brother Zhuowen. You've made a breakthrough. It's just luck. Zhuowen waved his hand and smiled. After chatting with Du Shan for a while, Zhuowen went to the center of mysterious Yuan Peak again. He planned to comprehend the Void Celestial Sutra in the Void Stone Tablet for the next 4 months. This was because he found that as he continued to comprehend and observe the scene in the Stone Tablet, he had a better grasp of the Void power. However, there was still a long way to go before he could master the Void Law. However, Zhuowen wasn't discouraged. After all, Yuan Ji had spent more than 10 years comprehending the Void Laws. How long had it been? Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry. When he arrived in front of the Void Stone Tablet, Zhuowen found that the Yenji 3 elders were not there. This surprised Zhuowen. When he came to comprehend the Void Celestial Sutra, Zhuowen was quite familiar with the Yenji 3 elders. Moreover, the 3 elders would pass on their experience of comprehending the Void Stone Tablet to Zhuowen from time to time, which benefited Zhuowen a lot. At this moment, Zhuowen was not used to the fact that the 3 elders were not there. Yenji and the other 2 old men have gone to the Hall of Ice and Fire. In 4 months, the violent energy of the Hall of Ice and Fire will weaken. Those 3 old fellows need to take some defensive measures in advance. A faint voice sounded from behind Zhuowen. Zhuowen turned around and saw a disheveled Xiao Yu walking out of the wooden house. His expression was tired, and it was unknown what he was doing in the dilapidated house. I see. Zhuowen nodded. Zhuowen, after the opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, you and Lu Qing had better work harder. Don't bring shame to our mysterious origin peak. I don't have any hope for the other trash on Ao Yuan Peak. I'm counting on the 2 of you, Xiao Yu suddenly said. Hearing this, Yuan was taken aback. He immediately nodded and grinned. Old man, don't worry. Even if you didn't say it, I won't fall behind this time. Speaking of this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of excitement. He had not forgotten the 10-year promise of the holy symbol of ice and fire. As long as he entered the first 8 levels of the Hall of Ice and Fire, he would be able to enter the 18th level with the holy symbol of ice and fire. At that time, he would be able to see the symbol spirit and obtain the real holy symbol of ice and fire. Xiao Yu nodded, but seemed to have realized something. His eyes suddenly widened as he stared at Zhuowen. He gritted his teeth and said, What did you just call me? You called me old man? Can't I call you that? Zhuowen tilted his head and asked. I'm your master. How can you call me that? It's simply disgraceful, Xiao Yu said in exasperation. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Then why did you call martial granduncle Yenji old man? They're your martial uncles. Since you call them old men, why can't I call you old man? Xiao Yu found himself speechless. He glared at Zhuowen and said, Little brat, hurry up and comprehend the spatial stone tablet. If you can comprehend the laws of space, I'll give you the position of peak master. Good luck. With that, Xiao Yu returned to the wooden hut. Strange noises rang out from inside. Who knew what Xiao Yu was fiddling with inside? Zhuowen smiled faintly as he felt a trace of warmth in his heart. This Xiao Yu was a hypocritical fellow. He could feel the concern in Xiao Yu's words. It was just that this fellow wasn't good at saying nice things. Zhuowen spent close to a month comprehending the spatial stone tablet. His grasp of spatial force had become even more proficient. Zhuowen clenched his right hand, and a pitch-black spatial force spread out from his body. With him as the center, it spread out to a radius of 30 meters. It's not like I haven't made any progress during this period of comprehension. The range of the spatial force has increased from 3 meters to around 30 meters. Withdrawing the spatial force, Zhuan revealed a satisfied expression. In this month, the 3 Yenji elders still had not returned. It should be as Xiaoyu had said, they were still in the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Boom! Suddenly, a trembling sound rang out from the inner courtyard. Immediately after, Yuan was stunned to discover that a resplendent pillar of fire surged up from the main peak where Sky Capital Peak was located. It shot straight into the sky and was extremely spectacular. Everyone in the inner courtyard was alarmed. They raised their heads and stared blankly at the pillar of fire in the sky. What's going on? Why is there another earthquake? Damn it! Xiao Yu's flustered and exasperated voice came from the wooden house. He immediately rushed out of the house and raised his head to see the pillar of fire that soared into the sky. He was stunned. Damn it, the beacon of Sky Capital Peak was actually lit by someone. Could it be that girl Mu Chenxue? Xiao Yu muttered in a low voice. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He was sure that the beacon was lit by Mu Chenxue. I say, old man Xiao, our mysterious Yuan Peak is really cold. We haven't even lit a single beacon. Suddenly, Duan said to Xiao Yu with a smile. Xiao Yu coughed dryly and said, I'll leave this heavy responsibility to you. Whether or not you can light the beacon will depend on you. Don't disappoint me. Sky Capital Peak had a total of 4 direct disciples. The condition to ignite the fire beacon was to successfully cultivate Sky Capital Peak's strongest technique, the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture. The first 3 direct disciples had naturally already learned the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture. Only Mu Chenxue had just come into contact with it. Among the 9 main peaks, Sky Capital Peak was undoubtedly the most lively. Countless disciples on the peak were looking up at the sky, staring excitedly at the pillar of fire that soared into the sky. This was the beacon that belonged only to their Sky Capital Peak. Moreover, this was not the only beacon of Sky Capital Peak. There were 4 other beacons. In addition to the one created by Mu Chenxue, there were 5 beacons. Among the 9 main peaks, it was like a crane among a flock of chickens. Old man Tiandu smiled as he stood in front of the star-picking pavilion. His eyes were filled with excitement. Although he knew that with Mu Chenxue's talent, it was not a problem for her to successfully cultivate the ancient heavenly scripture. However, he did not expect her cultivation speed to be so fast. There were 3 figures standing beside old man Tiandu. One of them was a youth with messy clothes and a lazy expression. His eyes were drowsy and he kept yawning. This youth looked at old man Tiandu and said in a dissatisfied voice, I say, old man Tiandu, did you pull me out because junior sister Chenxue lit the beacon? Aren't you making a big fuss over a minor issue? Do you know how much energy I waste just to breathe some air? Also, moving my fingers and limbs takes a lot of energy. You're wasting my time and energy like this, shouldn't you compensate me? Yang Yi, you little brat, Chenxue is your junior sister. Her lighting the beacon is a joyous matter, so why are you still so lazy? If you're like this, how will your martial arts progress in the future? Old man Tiandu's face turned red as he choked back these words. In the face of Yang Yi, the strongest disciple of Tiandu Peak and even the strongest disciple of the inner courtyard, old man Tiandu should be proud. However, Yang Yi's character was too lazy, to the point that it drove old man Tiandu crazy. Do you know how lazy this fellow was? He was so lazy that he wasn't even willing to breathe. In the inner court, he found a secret technique called the Qi sealing technique. After learning this cultivation technique, this fellow only breathed once a month. He could be considered a master of laziness. Alright, you really are long-winded. When junior sister Chenxue comes out, wake me up. Yang Yi lazily waved his hand, not caring about old man Tiandu's purple face. He laid down on the ground and began using the Qi sealing technique. There was no aura coming from his body, not even breathing, just like a dead person. This fellow... Old man Tiandu held his head as he muttered in a low voice. Other than Yang Yi, of the other two people, one of them was the cold-faced Jian Mu with a long sword on his back. The current Jian Mu's aura was much stronger compared to a few months ago. His body was releasing a faint emotionless aura, as if there was nothing in the outside world that could touch Jian Mu's heart. Jian Mu, did you listen to that brat Yang Yi's idea to cultivate the law of ruthlessness? Old man Tiandu's gaze fell on Jian Mu as he asked in a deep voice. Jian Mu shook his head expressionlessly. It was my own idea. It has nothing to do with senior brother. Moreover, the law of ruthlessness is very suitable for my sword. I can feel that before the 9 Underworld Convention, I can become an invincible Emperor Lord, or even a half-step saint. You're that confident? Old man Tiandu was rather surprised to hear Jian Mu's answer. However, sensing the increasingly fierce aura coming from Jian Mu, old man Tiandu didn't doubt Jian Mu's words. Since he cultivated the law of ruthlessness, Jian Mu's strength had grown stronger and his progress was extremely fast. He wasn't far from becoming an invincible Emperor Lord. Perhaps the law of ruthlessness was really suitable for Jian Mu, but cultivators who mastered the law of ruthlessness wouldn't have a good ending. This was what old man Tiandu was worried about. However, this was the path that Jian Mu had chosen, so he had no right to interfere with his decision. The third person standing not far from Jian Mu was the third direct disciple of Tiandu Peak. This person was a woman called Feng Yanlun. Her appearance was ordinary and her beauty was only average. However, her strength couldn't be underestimated, as she was a 7th-layer Emperor Realm expert. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.